Okay, now can you call it to order, Pete? Sorry.
Yeah, 7 o'clock, and I will call the meeting to order. All right. Casey, you want to go ahead and call roll and establish quorum?
Yes, I will. Chair Daly.
Here.
Vice Chair Morris, who I can see, but she must be grabbing a drink. Commissioner Yang.
Present.
Commissioner Corrigan.
Here.
Commissioner Valadez. And Commissioner Wang.
Present.
So we do have a quorum.
Okay, so we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
One moment.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice and liberty for all. All right. The first thing we'll do is hear public comments for items not on the agenda. Casey, you want to check and see if anybody wants to speak on something not on the agenda?
I am looking right now. I do not see any hands raised, and I have not had any previous requests to speak on items not on the agenda.
Okay.
Commissioner
And
Valadez had joined, and I just promoted her, so she was
Great.
here at the roll call.
wonderful. All right. So the next item is to approve the minutes of the last meeting from the September 8th meeting. Does anybody have anything that they've identified in the minutes that needs to be changed? If not, I would call for a motion to approve the minutes. Commissioner Wang.
Commissioner Wang.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, do I have a second? I'll second it.
Okay,
Okay.
Chair Daly,
Yes,
your vote.
got it.
Okay.
And all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Okay, it's unanimous.
Okay. And item number 2, review of the off-leash pilot program. I think it's customary. Do we start with the public comment or do we go right to the report and then have the comment?
No, so we'll have the public comment first.
Okay.
So I do have hands going up right now, which is perfect, because I know that there are multiple people in the public who wish to cede their time to another member for speaking.
Right.
We are going to call on people that we know wish to do that, or people who have raised their hands. The maximum, even with a number of seated comments, will be 10 minutes.
That's right.
And Chair Daly, what is your time
So
frame for each speaker?
Yeah, well, here's what we're going to do tonight.
Chair Daly, if I may.
Yeah.
I think what's customary is usually the report, so people understand what is being discussed, will be first. Then that's followed up by clarifying questions
Right.
for any questions, and then it will be public comment,
Right.
and then it'll come back to the commission for discussion at the
Okay.
point. So
That makes sense, Manny. Thanks. Just in terms of housekeeping, here's how we're going to handle this tonight, and I'll get this out there now so people understand. And if they need to, grab a bite to eat or whatever, they can understand what the timing of all this is going to be. We're going to go ahead and have the report, have clarifying questions, but no discussion by the commission until after the public comment period. Based on the history on this particular topic and the number of people that we have in attendance right now and the amount of written comment that we've seen, I am anticipating that we will shorten the individual comment periods to 2 minutes, which I think is a reasonable compromise. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to be heard without necessarily having to stay up until an extraordinary late hour of the evening. And so we're going to go with 2 minutes. All right, Vice Chair Morris?
I just wanted to make sure that I understand the order. So staff report first, subcommittee report second, clarifying questions following that, public comments, and then discussion.
Yeah,
I
we're not
believe
actually
that's
going to
the
go
proper
over,
order.
we're not actually going to have the staff present their report. It's been attached to the
Oh, sorry.
materials and everybody's looked at it. And there may be some redundancy with the subcommittee report. So what I'll do is I'll have your subcommittee do your report, and then we'll ask clarifying questions. And then if
Okay.
Manny has anything to add that may have been, that might have been presented in the staff report, but didn't get discussed in your subcommittee report, we'll pull it in that way. But I want to try and I just want to try and be as considerate of everybody's timeline as possible.
Okay.
So we're going to go right. We're going to basically go right to that subcommittee report. Commissioner Valadez.
Hi, real quickly, just seeing the attendance continue to rise, and I'm imagining most people are going to speak. 2 minutes times 30 or 40 people, we could be, doing questions for over an hour. I don't have a problem with that, but it is an hour, and we're going to have probably hours of discussion amongst the committee on the actual proposal. So, I don't know if you might consider going 90 seconds per person, but I understand if you go to using the city council as.
I appreciate your point of view. I've already given it some consideration and discussed it with staff and with the subcommittee. And we made the determination that 2 minutes was an appropriate compromise. I would go shorter, except for that I know that people are emotional about this topic, and I don't want them to feel like they've been unduly constrained. So we decided to compromise on 2 minutes. So that's what we're going to do. But I do appreciate your point of view. Thank you. All right, without any further ado, let's go ahead and turn it over to the subcommittee and hear their report.
Is someone going to run the PowerPoint for us? Donna was going to be in charge of that.
Oh, so Director Legge has had a family emergency, and so she's not going to be here tonight. And I don't know that Manny is necessarily prepared.
I should be able to if you can give me just 30 seconds to take a look.
No problem,
Thank
Casey.
you.
No problem.
I'll see if I have it in the correct format. So Teresa, it does look like I have the PDF, and I could put up the PowerPoint portion of that.
The one with the green background.
The green background? Okay, so let me do that. And I will expand it as best I can. Give me just a moment. I don't usually use it in this version. I don't know if anyone has any suggestions on how to get it to presenter mode.
So from PDF, you can't really go into presenter mode, but what I think you can do is maybe drag the division between the slides and the right part of the screen. If you drag that to the right, it may make the, it doesn't look like it's going to.
No. Okay, hold on. I've definitely had this down to nothing. Oh, there. That's a little bit better.
Yeah.
Good job, Casey.
I think that's sufficient.
It is.
Okay. I will adjust as you direct.
Perfect. I'll just say next slide.
Okay.
Thank you. So good evening and welcome to the Hillview Off-Leash Pilot Evaluation. As this slide says, parks make life better, and that is our goal always as we're making decisions and recommendations for Los Altans. Additionally, the goal tonight is to evaluate the pilot program and take what we have learned and figure out where to go from here. This discussion will help facilitate the progress towards that objective. Next slide, please. This is just a happy dog slide to make everybody smile and enjoy the moment of that little smiley face. Next slide, please. For this agenda, it's very self-explanatory. We will cover the following topics. Basically, the tone will be about what worked and what didn't work and recommendations. We'll answer clarifying questions, as it's been noted, at the end of the presentation. That's different than the discussion we'll have, and the discussion will follow the public comment. So we're going to go over the description briefly, the evaluation, the pros and cons, and the learnings, the takeaways, alternatives, and finally our recommendation. Next slide, please. So this just gives the basics about the pilot program, hours, and so on. One thing I've noticed, the off-leash hours ended up actually being more like 8 to 10 a.m. and then started at 4:30 until dusk and beyond most nights. And as it got darker, of course, it became a little bit more of a challenge for people to stay until that 9 o'clock hour. Next slide, please. This is just the basic rules. We had posted at the park in 2 locations the full set of rules, but it was basically, you know, be a good citizen, clean up after your dog, keep that noise down, keep the dog under voice control, and mind the hours. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a picture break. It's to show where the signage was, a little bit about the overflow of trash, which I would add wasn't a very common thing that we would see there. Next slide, please. So this is the criteria that the City Council provided to staff and the subcommittee on how to measure the success of the pilot program. So we gathered feedback from residents. It was through surveys. It was also through a survey. There was face-to-face interactions as well. And then of course, emails. We were to include the impact of whether or not there was reduced unlawful activity in other parks, and then evaluate the incidents reported, and then the expected cost versus the actual cost, and legal issues, field condition, attendance. This directive was given in February 9th, 2020. I think we have the wrong date there, sorry. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide is the beginning of the evaluation criteria. And what I wanted to share with you is there was an online survey, there's door-to-door, there are emails. And I think that's basically it. Next slide, please.
Okay, Teresa, I'll take over.
Thank you.
Yes. So just to set context on this slide, the online survey that was conducted by the city, it covered the full time period of the pilot, April 1st to September 28th. However, the data presented here are just through September 19th, and that was because we needed lead time to, gather the data, assess it, come up with findings, vet it internally. So these results are through the 19th, but we have had a chance to look at the last 9 days of the pilot period and the surveys that were returned, and the results don't change materially. So the first thing to note about the sample was it wasn't a random sample. We didn't proactively survey, a random sample of Los Altans, statistically. So we've done that in the past with the dog park workshops where we sent out postcard mailings in neighborhoods around a given park to attract an audience. And in this case, it was kind of a self-selecting audience that took the survey. So what that really means is all the data you're seeing here, you can't extrapolate these results to the rest of Los Altos. This is more directional, qualitative feedback from residents that we're focused on as we go through this. That said, 86 of 94 respondents were residents in this batch of data through September 19th. we found that there was a glitch, I guess, an oversight where we had a couple of questions that were important, which were not in the initial survey, which we added kind of midstream. So one of those was, are you a dog owner? Because we thought it was important to be able to, delineate between feedback between dog owners and non-dog owners. And 85% of the 40 residents who responded to that question were dog owners. Another question we asked in the survey, we asked, would you use a dog park if it were available in your home park? What we wanted to do was add a question about, force a choice. So choose one option for your home park. Add off-leash hours that are reserved for dog owners, or don't add off-leash hours, preserve existing use of the park. And that's what the response here that you see is 30 of 34 dog owners wanted to add off-leash, and 100% of the non-dog owners didn't want to add off-leash. If you combine those data points together and you weighted the fact that dog owners are 35 to 40% of the population, you'd come out with the conclusion that 67% don't want off-leash. But as I said, because of the way we sampled, that's not you can't make that quantitative statement. So that was just sort of an interesting finding, but it's not statistically valid to say that. One other question that we did ask of dog owners was, how often would you use off-leash if it were available in your home park? And the answer there on average for dog owners was 5 days a week. So healthy use, anticipated among that subset of dog owner respondents. So the conclusion, again, I mentioned, it's not really a quantitative survey. We didn't accurately represent both dog owners and non-dog owners. Prior surveys, like in 2022, the workshops, and in 2018, both of those skewed pretty heavily to dog ownership. I think it was 64 to 66% of respondents were dog owners. So you're having this oversampling, which tends to overweight the feedback from dog owners in those results. So the bottom line of all of this, from our looking at the data, per the consistent history of this initiative, there's a pretty equal division between people who want off-leash and who don't want off-leash. And in our view, we also given what you're hearing, we didn't really reach all of our residents in an effective manner, but I'm not sure that was the intent of the survey from the beginning, to have a statistically valid survey, just an observation. Next slide. So the next feedback mechanism was for the city had open-ended responses in the online survey. So respondents could provide multiple responses, and they could do it in their own terms. And this is what was summarized by the city. Just the basic question, what's working well? Well, it's nice to have an off-leash location, isn't it? What's not working? The hours are inconvenient or too short. How could we improve off-leash? Naturally extended hours, but also there was a call for fencing, around Hillview. So these responses that you see here, you'll see them reoccur throughout the presentation. These are some common themes that come up. Next slide, please. Then we thought, I think we mentioned it one of the park meetings, that we wanted to talk to the neighborhood around Hillview. This is in September that Vice Chair Morris and I went door to door, and we tried to get as much coverage of like a city block around Hillview baseball field and see what those people felt, because we thought they would be most impacted. So we visited 21 homes, 12 people responded, 8 of the 12 were dog owners, and 83% when we asked them, are you aware there's an off-leash pilot program at Hillview? 83% said yes. And to be honest, it's kind of surprising to me. I thought they were neighbors. I thought it'd be 100%, but for what it's worth. Next slide. These are the actual questions we asked. First question was, do you want off-leash hours to continue at Hillview? And this is like a 1 to 5 scale. 5 is a strong yes. So we had a mixed response. 5 had a strong yes. 3 had a strong no. 1 had a slight no, like a 2.5. And then 3 were mixed because they said no, but if there are significant changes made, I'd be a yes. So kind of a mixed bag there. The next question was, have off-leash hours affected you? More of an open-ended question. And so in response to that, it was kind of a some yes, some no again. 2 people said yes in a positive way, you know, community, convenience. 5 were yes in a negative way, and then 5 weren't affected. So some examples people gave for how they were affected: car, dog, and pedestrian activity increased. That was okay for some and not okay for others. Noise was a factor, you know, barking and people on the field. That was a negative effect for some. And then just general areas residents mentioned: dogs running loose through their driveways, yards, garages, sort of urinating, digging in yards, and then parking increased in the local area. The next question was, did you yourself use the off-leash hours? Interestingly, there were 8 dog owners, 4 yes, 4 no. And this is consistent with past findings from the subcommittee that though 35 to 40% of dog owners, 35 to 40% of households have a dog, not all want to have their dogs go off leash in a local park. We also thought we'd ask in the event, you know, if there for any reason the pilot doesn't continue, what alternative would you have? Where would you go? So the top response there, well, just it was a myriad of responses because we didn't constrain people. They could see multiple things. Some people didn't know. Several said they would stay at Hillview even though they knew it wouldn't be authorized. And then others mentioned Mountain View, Palo Alto, and Lincoln Park in Los Altos. In terms of the benefits themes, those were, you know, community. I mean, and you've seen the emails as well. I mean, it's overwhelming sense of community among the dog owners, the off-leash dog owners, convenience, and then it fills a core need for dog owners and for their dogs. The issues, there were a number of issues, kind of a myriad: safety, cars, crowds, field condition. Some didn't say it was suitable for mixed use at Hillview. They wanted to save the green space and they wanted to make sure Little League continued on. Next, oh, I think this is next slide back to Vice Chair Morris.
It is. Okay. So regarding whether or not unlawful activity was reduced, the subcommittee and I, so John, Commissioner Corrigan and I visited 80 times total the park, and 26 of them our visits were during off hours. We went at different times of the day. Typically he covered morning, I covered evening. Weekends we just sort of randomly took over whichever one worked for us. So 26 of the times that we went were during off hours, and we did observe people there in the off hours about 69% of the time that we were there. So of the 26 times that we were there during the non-off-leash hours. Both park subcommittee and staff noticed no reduction in unlawful activity at any of the other parks. So it didn't seem to draw the activity from our other city parks. It just allowed people closer to Hillview to use that. And I would say that was, that meshed with when I would ask people where they lived when I was there visiting, that I would hear they lived nearby. Most people did, a few people from out of town, but there weren't that many. Mostly you'd see the off-leash at pretty much every park: Covington, North and South Lincoln, Hillview Soccer, Shout, McKinsey, Heritage Oaks, Reseda. And then people also told us that basically they also use Santa Rita School and Almond School as other active areas. And then a couple residents told me that they use Reseda in the evening, that there's a group of people that meet there every evening. And then also Grant Park is used on a regular basis, and up to a group of 10 is often there. The heaviest amount of times that it was used was between 9 and 10 a.m. and 4:30 and 7 p.m. Those were, of course, not the authorized times, but that's when we saw a lot of use during those times. There were reports of people letting their dogs off leash from the car, so they would not have them on leash as they walked into the park, but instead just let them off leash. And that would create a bit of a ruckus for some of the people exiting the park or walking through the park, some of the neighbors, and sometimes there would be dog fights as a result. Next slide, please. Attacks. So the attacks we know of are basically listed on the slide. We heard about more, and also about people adjusting their travel routes as a result of off-leash. Some of these reports were confirmed in the emails that we received. Hopefully everybody got a chance to read them. I know a couple came in last minute, but hopefully all the commissioners had a chance to read them. There were 3 attacks reported to police during the pilot. Both police and animal control saw an increase of 5 times the amount of usual calls and warnings. This is comparing the pilot period of 2021 to all of 2020. Staff might have some additional information about that, but then again, maybe John will pick that up because I know some of the numbers changed a little bit. Barking increased as an issue as the pilot progressed. So as more dogs came, barking increased, not surprisingly. That level was observed when we were just there during short visits. So basically we would say that maybe that would be a common occurrence even when we weren't there, that was kind of a normal thing because it was at all times that we would go. There were different types of barking. I thought this was interesting. I just sat and listened a number of times, and I noticed that as dogs came into the group, there would be a lot of barking, like greetings, and then an adjusting of what they were doing and who was in charge or whatever the dogs are doing when they do that. But that was a really common time to see the increased barking. And sometimes there'd just be barking with dogs scuffling, like they'd be playing or kind of putting each other in their place. There'd be the barking that would go with that. And then there was a lot of owners yelling for their dogs, trying to get them to come to them. And none of this is unusual, of course, when you have dogs in a park or off leash and the owners are there and enjoying the time. The unfortunate part is that it was disturbing to some of the neighbors. So the dog activity outside of the field included the off leash coming and going, as I described, and it increased. The off leash activity outside of the field increased when the protective fencing came down. So there was a lot of fencing around the field for the community center when it was being built. When that came down, of course, all of the off-leash activity outside of the park increased quite a bit. Next slide, please.
Just really quickly, Vice Chair Morris, Commissioner Corrigan mentioned that you might want to have an audio video file played at this time, and I think I can do it if you'd like me. It has to do with the dog barking.
Yes, please.
Okay, give me just a moment.
Okay.
I do think I am able to do that. It'll just take me just a second.
Okay.
Okay, so one moment now, I just have to share my audio as well. So I want to turn it up so we make sure we have full volume. I'm going to hit share and then I will hit.
We didn't see the video, I don't think, at least I didn't.
The video wasn't able to show it. It said that the video wasn't formatted properly.
Oh.
So I don't know if that's, were you able to see the video, Commissioner Corrigan, when you first received the file?
Yes, but I guess we could just describe
Okay.
what it was, which was, it was one of the neighbors had videotaped a dog barking unattended facing him. He he scanned Hillview Field and there was no owner within sight, but the dog was positioned standalone barking at him. So that was what he was trying to convey.
So I'm sorry that I only was able to do the audio. Thank you for explaining that piece. I will move on to the next slide.
Thank you. Just wanted to say, we really appreciate how you're pinch hitting here, Casey. It's very, I'm sure it's challenging. So thank you for doing it. You're doing a great job. Okay, so we aren't exactly sure what the costs are, what they came down to, or we know what the estimate was. It was just under 7,000, but we don't have the numbers yet. And I'm assuming staff will put those together so that we have them, but right now they aren't available to us. I know that there was an increase due to a larger use of the waste bags. As one email said, that's a good thing because it means that people are picking up the waste. It is and it isn't. There was a tendency to just take extra bags. So that increased, and then there was a bit of a sign change towards the beginning of the pilot program. So I assume there was additional cost for that because they had to be reprinted and moved. So that's it. Next slide, please. This is really up to the city attorney to decide whether or not we have any legal issues. According to the city attorney, we don't. We do currently have one lawsuit threat due to dog-on-dog, repeat dog-on-dog attacks, and we also have one lawsuit threat due to impact on the neighborhood. Other than that, the dog on human attacks, we're just guessing that there would be an increase on any sort of attack, be it dog on dog or dog on human, if the pilot program were rolled out at Hillview or anywhere else without significant changes being made. So that's it for that one. Next slide, please. And let's see, I think this is my last one, and then Commissioner Corrigan will go back to doing it. This one's a little bit dense. So the field is showing quite a bit of wear and tear, including large dry sections. A number of enlarged holes and uneven turf are occurring. It could be drought related. It could be due to off-leash activity. We're not 100% sure about this. We do know that there are brown pathways worn from the neighborhood entrances. So that's something that definitely came from the off-leash activity. There was a time during the program where there were raccoons that dug up the field, and then the crows came in and helped that along. So there were patches. They were pretty small and they were closer to the community center for the most part where that happened. And then there was a second round of the little rascal raccoons coming through in a smaller patch to the side. I checked with staff. They confirmed that they were continuing to maintain the field just as they normally would during this time of the year. The other difference, though, is that Little League wasn't using it, and Little League does do a little bit of their own maintenance, at least for the infield. And I will add that people were very good about staying off of the infield with their dogs. It was rare that I ever saw anybody when I was there on the infield. So the signage, despite the dogs not being able to read, the signage did work for that. The dog owners were really respectful of it. There also was a time when there was a reduction of water for a short period of time. I believe it was, and Manny can pipe in on this, but I believe it was a very short amount of time. Then there was an increase in the water. That's where the puddling came from. They were losing some plants at the community center, so they increased the water. So that was probably in the last 2 weeks that happened. And again, I can be corrected on that if I'm wrong. So when we do a comparison of the field conditions, in Hillview had, this is 6/16, and in that area, the summertime, basically, Hillview had 10 deep ruts, and then at 6/23, there were 5 deep ruts. So dog owners were filling in the holes, and they were also putting down seed during the pilot program. 7.4 ruts, 5 ruts were the average. Excluding Covington Field, the other 5 parks average deep rut were, let's see if I can get them. Heritage had 2, Grant Park had 1, Hillview had none. The soccer field, I mean, Covington Field had 10, and in the field itself. And then it also has its own activity. North Lincoln had none and South Lincoln had 2. Let me see, I'm trying to make sure I didn't forget anything in that area. Okay, and then dog waste. The subcommittee hardly ever saw any leftover poop there. Initially, you know, I would see some when I would go, but mostly people were really good about picking that up. And staff did do pickup every morning. They would walk the field and look too. And then there was a resident that I was told also did that, and that showed up in an email that that person did that. Let's see. I think that's it for that slide. Next slide, please. Just making sure I'm covering everything. There's a lot to cover. Okay. So for this slide, it's the schedule that would normally have been in place. So the reason the hours were chosen as they were chosen is because of the normal activity. COVID came in, and you know, we didn't have Little League there. So that's normally we have quite a bit of activity on that field. And then the other months, which is August to mid-November, there's activity on Wednesday mornings, and then Monday through Friday activities from approximately 4 or 5 start to 7 p.m. So again, that's how these hours were chosen for this park. Every single neighborhood park in Los Altos, which all of them are identified as neighborhood parks, has a lot of activity at them. They're all small parks. They all have heavy activity. With COVID, of course, there was a little adjustment to that. As many know, our parks will close down from November to the end of January. So the middle of November, that, you know, coming right up, they'll all close down for a little bit. So finding a location for this off-leash pilot program, of course, was a challenge, and we were lucky that we landed on Hillview, and there weren't any people saying, no, not at Hillview when it started. It changed a little bit with time. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, and I believe this is John.
Yes. So thank you, Vice Chair Morris. So the next section is really, we'll go through this very quickly. It's just screenshots showing the, you know, the evolution of Hillview over time. If people hadn't been visiting regularly, this gives you a sense of what it looked like. And again, I want to reiterate what Vice Chair Morris just said, that there was no Little League activity. So you can imagine there might have been a bit more impact if there had been other organized activity on the field at the time. Next slide, please. So here we are early in the pilot. You can see April 17th, about 2 to 3 weeks in, everything looks pretty good. And by the way, as we go through these slides, there are no slides specific to the infield because there really was no, the visitors did a great job in not impacting that infield. Next slide, please. So May 6th, again, you have that, the left hand is that overall view of Hillview, and the right is, I tried to take a photo from kind of the same spot relatively throughout this progression. And so on the right-hand side, you can start seeing the appearance of ruts. And when we talk about ruts that Vice Chair Morris said, mentioned, these, I consider ruts things that are maybe 1 to 2 inches deep, where if you were running to catch a baseball, you might trip and fall. Like, there are plenty of brown patches, but ruts got our attention as more of a safety hazard, and they were more, you know, pronounced at Hillview. Even the Covington reference, I think I misstated in my data. It's really that there's the Rosita baseball field, which is pretty massive relative to Hillview. That's the one that had about 10 deep ruts midsummer, as you know, 10 to 5 at Hillview baseball field, but Rosita is a much larger field, so you would have expected, I don't know, you know, 30 ruts if it were to be a comparable scale. So in any event, Hillview does seem to show more deep ruts than the others. Next slide, please. So mid-May, I think you start seeing more deterioration, but again, you know, that could be due to watering, but in any event, we'll keep going to the next slide. Again, just shots of how things kind of gradually worsen. The slide on the right is a little, I mean, it looks really black. I think that's part of the lighting of the field. It was more trying to, the lighting of the time of day, but I think it's more how barren the ground is there at that point on the right-hand side. So next slide, please. And we wanted to have one example of the marauding raccoon activity that Vice Chair Morris mentioned, those tufts of grass that are lifted up off the ground, we believe are due to raccoons, as opposed to some of the brown patches and other wear and tear you might see. Next slide, please. This is more of a close-up in mid-September now for, we're just pretty solid wear and tear in the field. Next slide. This is one of the entrance pathways into Hillview. This is from the Edith entrance. So you can see pretty clearly, it looks like a walkway or entrance path onto the Hillview that was worn in. And then the next slide, same day, just another, what looks to be a pathway or walkway into the field from the sidewalk. Next slide. So that was it for the progression of photos. Back to the evaluation, the final evaluation criterion was attendance. Couple of things we noticed, both from residents, our observations, and from the survey, was that roughly 2/3 of the people who went to Hillview were local. They walked there, and 1/3 drove. As the pilot progressed, there was a core group of, loyal Hillview off-leash users that were there the whole time, but we did see, starting in months like 4 and 5 of the pilot, more new dog owners appearing. So, more of a destination now as word got out about Hillview. Later in the pilot, more small dogs. We saw an increase in the pilot as time progressed from 5 to 10 dog owners at a time when we observed to 10 to 20. So again, as word got out, more of a destination site. The next bullet's redundant with the first one. 2/3 of the people were close to the park. And then we did have a small but observable increase in dogs that were driven to the park that we noticed as the pilot progressed. Casey, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. And this slide just shows a graphical view of that trend. A couple things. So as we said, you can see on the far right, the graph's going up, pretty abruptly, an increase in attendance. The left-hand axis is, we did 54 visits during approved, authorized hours for the course of the pilot. So this charts for each of those visits, how many dog owners were observed on the field during that visit. The dip you see mid-summer, late May through late July, that's not a dip in attendance. It's really it's a change in the weighting of the time of day that we visited. Most of the visits during that time period were before 8 a.m. And we observed pretty clearly that before about 7:45 a.m., there's almost no off-leash activity. And so we shifted focus from then on to look at 8 to 9 a.m. and then continue the evening observations. So that's why you see things start picking up in August. Even so, Casey, if you can scroll up just a little bit on the slide, or the other way, sorry. Yeah, there you go. You can see that the visits doubled, that the average number of people on the field doubled in the morning from August to September, and it tripled from July to September in the evening. So just more data to support the trend. Can we go to the next slide? And here's a typical, if you swing by Hillview for off-leash, this is what you'll see, a lot of activity, people engaged with their dogs. So just a happy, productive session of off-leash activity, and notice nobody's on the infield too. So that's all good. Next slide. So we quickly went through the various criteria. This is just a wrap up of what you've already heard, and it's the subcommittee's kind of view of how things came out on each criterion. Resident feedback, we would say, is mixed given what we discussed. Reduced unlawful activity. We think, there was actually, technically there was an increase in unlawful activity at Hillview because we had established set hours where they were approved off-leash hours. And as Vice Chair Morris mentioned, 69% of the time we visited outside of approved hours, there was off-leash activity there. And nevertheless, we didn't seem to see much reduction anecdotally in off-leash use around the city, especially, you know, it's understandable given that we saw maybe 20 dogs at Hillview at a given time, but there are 3,800 dogs in Los Altos. So presumably they're going somewhere else for off-leash. Incidents, I just wanted to clarify, I know Vice Chair Morris mentioned this about the police reports and animal control. We got really recent data in the staff report that's posted on our Parks and Rec Commission site. There was some new data listed there, and it compares, whereas Vice Chair Morris mentioned, we compared the pilot period of this year versus all of calendar 2020. The staff updated the data to just compare apples to apples, April through September for both years. And what caught my eye in particular was, I think there were 42 animal control reports at Hillview this year during the pilot period, and there was 1 last year. And in fact, it's either for the rest of Los Altos combined, all of their parks combined, I think it was 5, it might've been 8 total, but I think it was 5 total incidents. So 8 times as many incidents at Hillview as the rest of Los Altos combined. And for police reports, Hillview this year Hillview alone had 70% the amount of police reports of all compared to all of the rest of Los Altos parks. So pretty high, you know, level of incidents occurring during the pilot. Cost will defer, as Vice Chair Morris said, will defer to staff on that. Legal issues will also defer to the city attorney and the risk manager, but needless to say, we had 2 residents mention directly to us that they're considering legal action relative to the off-leash hours. Field condition, you know, it just deteriorated throughout the course of the pilot. And certainly attendance was on a positive trajectory from beginning to end. That of course, has its pros and cons. It kind of starts trickling into the other areas. As attendance goes up, issues start to bubble up associated with that. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay. So the summary of the pros for this pilot program. So there were so many positives regarding the pilot program. And I want to just take a minute and say, give our heartfelt thanks to everyone who shared their stories with us via email and in person. I heard a lot of stories when I would chat with people at the park. We know that the off-leash pilot program was a success for the people who used it, because they've let us know that during, you know, via emails and conversations. So community building, that's what we hear over and over again, that it was a great community building situation. There were a couple comments that stood out for us. Well, there were a lot, but we pulled a couple. Caregiver said off-leash hours were a lifesaver due to the stress of COVID. Another said they met neighbors they never met, and it helps provide a support system as people face challenges in their life. And as commissioners read the emails, I'm sure that you saw things like, you know, they've created calendars. There have been babies that have been born, and Mehmet, one of the people that wrote in, he and his wife were to get married, but then COVID came, and so they had to cancel the wedding, but they had a little celebration at the park afterwards. So that was really sweet. And I do want to give a shout out actually to Mehmet. He was one of the people who each and every time I went there, one was extremely friendly, which most everybody was, but he was always paying attention to all of the dogs and pointing out to people if they needed to clean up. So I appreciated that. There were some leaders that definitely came out of this as far as the pilot program community went. It was generally a consistent group of residents who used the park on a regular basis. As the program continued, there was an expansion that included people a little further out, but essentially there was a core group that attended the off-leash hours. it was nice too. We thought that it was great benefit to the residents that there was a place for them to go where it was legal to have their dogs off leash. The pilot brought a few new visitors to Los Altos. I talked to a couple of them. There was a young couple there from Mountain View. There were a couple ladies there from Palo Alto. So there was a little bit of out of town, not a ton, but again, I didn't ask everybody where are you from as I was there. The pilot program, during the pilot program, people were good about telling each other you need to clean up, and also there was a great effort to stop dogs from digging. And I have to say, having observed that, that is a very difficult task to accomplish, to try to get a dog that's very focused on a hole to stop digging that hole. So I think that's it for that slide. The next slide, please. So this one just shows some of that good, dog owner behavior of cleaning up after the dog. And then the next slide, please. So the cons, we know what some of them are based on some of the letters. And if anybody attended the city council meeting where they expanded the hours, you may have heard some of them. We covered a lot of things during the presentation. And other than bullets 5 and 6 on this slide. So I'm gonna just take a minute and cover those points. There were pedestrians who said that they stopped going through the park. There was even one person who told me that an elderly lady that used to walk through the park stopped, but one day when they were walking through, she asked if they would walk her through. Because she was afraid of the dogs. There were bicyclists who were afraid to continue on the path because there were dogs on the actual sidewalk. So there was a general decline. Also, I was told about a general decline of actually using the field, just, people picnicking, let's say, or going there to throw the ball or something like that. So there was a change in the usage of the field. And then there was another dog owner who had a small dog, and they said that their dog was rolled repeatedly. And so they no longer came to the park with the dog. So there may have been other people who had, issues with their dogs not being comfortable there or not fitting in there, and then they stopped going. And I think that's it for that slide. Next slide, please. So we learned a ton from this pilot program. It's really great that we did it, and we have some information now that we didn't have before. One thing is the pilot created its own behavior. So by that, I mean that people kind of did what they wanted to do. They sort of made their own rules. They also did, some, like I said, some leaders emerged, and they were telling other people, watch this, your dog did that kind of a thing. We have this idea that this pilot is as good as it's going to get. When you have a pilot, people are on their best behavior. So this is the most fenced in grass field venue in Los Altos. There's no other area that has as much fencing as this one does. The dog owners are on their best behavior, as I mentioned. They're picking up after one another. They were fertilizing the field, filling holes. They were asking us what they could do to help with the pilot program. There was no little league use on the field, so we didn't have that impact as well, which is kind of a confounding variable. It would have been good if we had it, because that would have made it a more complete pilot program, so we really know what is the field going to be like if it's multi-use with Little League and with the dogs off leash. There appeared to be, as I mentioned, limited out-of-town use, and in addition, there was a more relaxed rule following as it progressed. So as people got more comfortable with it, they relaxed the rules in general. Regardless of the approved hours and locations, some residents will do what they want to do, and that does reflect badly on the pilot program when that happens. So we did try to keep that in mind and look at what were the majority of people doing, but that doesn't take away from the fact that those that didn't follow the rules or let their dogs go rogue, so to speak, didn't affect the overall pilot program. And then the barking was significant. And I witnessed it, heard it, and neighbors complained about it. And I was in a meeting at the Lacey building, and I was hearing a dog barking, and I thought, that's odd, you know, hearing this dog just bark and bark and bark. And then I realized, oh, it was coming from the Hillview baseball field. And after the meeting, I walked over, it was 4:30, and sure enough, there was a dog on the field just barking away with its owner. So it was an issue and a concern. The longer hours, so the more people stayed, the longer the socializing and the noise and the increase in that. And it ended up that it included drinking on weekends and stuff. So that was a concern as well. And then as there was more socializing, there was a decrease in the overall supervision of dogs. And again, there were some people that would be there that would, you know, kind of remind people to pay attention to their dogs. But when they weren't there and people didn't pay attention, they just didn't. So we did have dog attacks. It really does build community. So we know that this is something that allows people to get together and chat and get to know each other. And certainly during COVID, it was a big positive for people to have the support and the neighbor interactions. We thought about that a little bit, and one of the things we thought is, hey, what about the rest of the Los Altos residents? We need to create some community in these parks for those people too, if there's a way that we could do it. So one idea we had was, why not have a little block party, you know, get block parties started, where the focus is not just on attending something, but actually participating and getting to know each other. So that grew out of this pilot program. Like, this is a great thing that happened. It would be nice if we could build on it for others. Let's see, the leaders I mentioned, people really, as I said, kind of did what they wanted to do. And in order to adjust for that, the hours need to be more varied and longer if we were to go forward with off leash, either at Hillview or any other park. The alternative, or the included with point we'd like to make, is that there needs to be more enforcement, and stronger enforcement that includes fines for illegal behavior. That might have nipped some of this in the bud. That was not a focus of the pilot program. The pilot program, there was a conscious decision to make it more of an education, give warnings. So I'm not sure if there was a stronger enforcement and more tickets were given, if that would have changed some of the behavior or not. As Commissioner Corrigan mentioned, we didn't reach as many people with our survey as perhaps we needed to, but we still have room to grow in our survey taking. And what we did get, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, sorry, the people that were reached represent between 60 and 65% of households. So I think Commissioner Corrigan may correct me on that. Should have come up with a mechanism we learned that we should have come up with a mechanism to actually determine by numbers the off-leash activity in the other parks. So that was something that going forward, it would be good if we do more off-leash, that we have a way of assessing that. There is a consistent group that utilizes the area. It's pretty small relative to dog owner population, approximately 25 off-leash dogs versus the 3,800 dogs in Los Altos. And again, a lot of them stayed close to their home when, you know, visiting Hillview, and a lot of people said that they would just not go to the other parks if it was at a different park than Hillview. More people equals more wear and tear. It's kind of a duh, but it's something that we learned, and that there's more barking and more safety risks with more people congregating all at once. Okay, next slide, please. And I believe John's on this one.
Yes, thank you. So kind of to sum up the main takeaways, when we looked at, you know, pairing resident feedback with our own observations. One of the characteristics of an ideal off-leash location is as much fencing as possible. So, you know, we've noticed that dogs tended to gravitate towards open space or openings in fences. So, you know, which was borne out by the data that Vice Chair Morris mentioned about an increase. Once we had some openings at Hillview, the number of escapes went up. Maximum setback from residences, pedestrians, cyclists, that's important, certainly to limit the possibility of off-leash interactions with passersby, and also the, you know, the noise factor for neighbors. And, you know, if you look at a number of, like you go to Cuesta Park or you see Mitchell Park, their dog park, they're pretty much, they're very, you know, remote from the adjacent neighbors. I'm sure there are examples where that's not the case, but those jump out as being pretty distant from the immediate neighborhood. And then the location should be used minimally for other purposes. From our perspective, it looked like mixed use may not be optimal. The field gets worn out. The maintenance group said if there's poof left on the field, when they're mowing the lawn, that's gonna sort of spray across the field. Some residents said they had concerns about their children playing in sort of soiled grass. We mentioned the deep ruts in the field as sort of a safety issue for, you know, organized sports. So those are the kind of the three keys we settled on. Hours need, the next two, Vice Chair Morris mentioned about hours and enforcement. And then the other item is accurate costs. So we do think we need to have a better handle on what would it cost to truly enforce, you know, to have animal control, police enforcing the rules. What would it cost to maintain the field? And that would be important not only for budgetary purposes, but also given that there's sort of a divided opinion on off-leash in the city, then it might be useful for kind of cost-benefit analysis. How much is this being used? How much will it cost? That kind of analysis. So next slide.
So potential improvements for any future off-leash programs. So we feel dogs must go on leash if any non-dog owner or on-leash dog owner is present. These are ideas. Ramped up enforcement is crucial to keep in mind that folks do what they want. An example is input from police officer. We spoke with a police officer who was enforcing the rules, but then as soon as the police officer left, the owners immediately went back to violating in the way that they were when the police officer had talked to him. So we have the question that we put out there is how much are we willing to spend as a city, and how persistent would security in the park affect, if we had a lot of security in the park, how would it affect the behavior, if at all, or the park experience? More prominent posted feedback, we feel having that would be a good idea. Some ideas were to send a mailer with details about who to contact to give feedback. Post the same information on social media, do it on a regular basis so that there'd be an education, you know, just saying, hey, we have off leash at this park. This is, you know, these are the rules, so that people were constantly kind of seeing the information about it. And that we would have a dedicated enforcement phone number so that it didn't have to go through dispatch. We create shutdown parameters and establish a regular review plan. I think that's important if we're to go forward on this, that we have some way to be able to say, you know, let's stop it. Per our report, we suggest having one idea is to have a permit system that allows no more than, say, 5 dogs to gather. You know, that's just an example of a number. It could be, this permit system could be on a monthly basis at an approved location. It could be done through the recreation department. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. So the permit would be that more than 5 dogs could gather. So if we keep the amount small in the parks, if we had a permit system, if people wanted to have larger gatherings, they'd go through the permit system. There'd be a place and a time for them to be able to get together so that groups of say 10, 15, 20 could do that in a legal manner, and they could follow all the park rules and you know, basically have the opportunity to get together and have a larger socialization time. Also, maybe a time limit to how long people can stay on the field, because that way it would keep people moving in and out of the field and allow for more people to use it, but not in such a concentrated way where there's, you know, so many people on the field at one time. We talked about a dog handler registration. Actually, somebody even recommended this, where they sign a use agreement, the dog owners do, and it's to strengthen the compliance. It might include a clause that says a person will not be allowed in the parks for a specific amount of time if found to violate the agreement. And that sort of a clause would give the agreement some teeth. We think the hours, if possible, would need to be modified to 8 to 10 a.m. and 4 to 8 p.m. However, taking Hillview as an example, that would conflict with the Little League time that they would use that field. And interestingly, these hours that we're suggesting align with the city survey that was done in 2018. It's on page 50 of the city survey. People said 8 to 10 and 6 to 8 p.m. the most popular times that they would use it. There are concerns about reserving these hours. Let's say, you know, the commission decides to recommend those hours if we move forward with a off-leash program someplace. Those are, for one, the History Museum, they wrote in and said that they're having some issues with dogs going through through their patio area. The dogs are defecating in the patio. They have to clean it up. They have dogs barking when they're trying to have weddings and there's music being played. And they said, the History Museum noted that that's reneging on a prior commitment that they have with the city. And then again, it's too early for Little League. Those hours are. Also, those hours would reserve the park hours for the off-leash community, since it's not mixed use during that time. And then that would crowd out 60 to 65% of the population at a prime time for all residents. So it would be taking the, you know, kind of core good hours, best hours, and giving it to this subset of dog owners. We think that it would be good to switch the criteria of what dogs are not allowed. So right now, the criteria is a vicious dog is not allowed. Our recommendation is to change that to dangerous. Dangerous is a little bit less than vicious. And it seems like, given the attacks that we had, dangerous would be a better criteria for saying that a dog would not be allowed to be in the park. It's really dangerous to wait until a dog reaches the vicious threshold. The dangerous, as I said, threshold comes before the vicious one. If the off-leash is implemented at Hillview or anywhere else, we need perimeter fencing. So perimeter fencing, if you read the report, there's a definition of an off-leash area and a definition of fenced-in dogs. We're not talking about a fenced-in dog park. We're talking about perimeter fencing around a park that would allow people to still use the park as a regular park, wouldn't isolate the dogs into a small location. But there needs to be fencing. That just came out of the pilot program. And the fencing, depending on where it is located, pretty much because we have all small neighborhood parks in Los Altos, we'd need to be looking into excellent sound barriers, because it is definitely intrusive on people in their yards and in their houses. And prior to the pilot program starting, we had our workshops and outreach, and people from different parks said that often they're hearing dogs being called for and whistled for, you know, very early in the morning. It wakes them up. So this isn't it wasn't a Hillview issue before the pilot program, but it became a Hillview issue during the pilot program. So so anyway, those are some of the things that we would recommend if we move forward. Next slide, please. So due to this This is, you know, the big one we've all been waiting for. So due to the fact that the pilot program did not meet the city council criteria and that it shifted from accepted by all in the neighborhood to a problem for some, we're asking the commission to recommend to discontinue the off-leash the off-leash program at Hillview. However, and it's a big however, we respectfully ask you to approve our request and recommendation, make a recommendation to council to allow the subcommittee to continue and the commission to continue to work on future ideas for the off-leash potential in Los Altos. We submitted some ideas in attachment A of the report. We've been gathering them as we go along and people make suggestions. We've also been brainstorming ourselves. If we're allowed to move forward, we'd like to flesh some of those ideas out. We would work with staff once we do a great deal of the work ourselves and see if it's feasible for us to be able to do any of these ideas that we have. And then we'd come back to the Park Commission with more concrete details about the ideas that we have, again, that you'll see in attachment A. And that's it, other than we have a couple slides for being able to talk about the alternatives, which John is going to do, and then questions. And I just want to say thank you. That's the end of my part of the presentation. So thanks for listening so far. And here comes the end.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Chair Morris. And the alternatives, so we outlined a number of off-leash alternatives in our report in the tools for next steps attachment. I think that's attachment 1, not attachment A. I could be wrong, but in that case, we just encourage residents to read that because there's a lot of thinking going into those alternatives. So some of the things we thought about with these alternatives, what are the considerations that we need to take into account? One is, you know, is the off-leash venue within walking distance because people want to use their local parks? How close are the homes to the off-leash venue given the, you know, the issues that have been raised by neighbors? Enforcement, what can we do with enforcement to reduce the impacts of off-leash? Like, how do we reduce unlawful, unruly, or disruptive behavior? A key item which Vice Chair Morris referenced was, is there something we can come up with, and I think this is really important, that can kind of recreate the pre-pilot behavior, which is, we've all heard in various meetings on this topic over the years, you know, everyone goes off leash in Los Altos parks, and they do. We all know that's happening. But the question is, how do we formalize that behavior? How do we get down to just a few dogs off leash at a given time, which kind of makes all of these issues go away? If we could find a way to get the numbers down, but consistent, that would be a nice alternative. And you know, a corollary to that is, how do we avoid having any park within Los Altos become a destination site? How do we avoid it having become a big Cuesta Park destination that gets, you know, a massive volume of dogs off leash? Because again, we are small neighborhood parks. People want to go to their local parks, and they're small for the local community. So given that, when we talked about alternatives in our report in the tools for next steps, we came up with a couple that they had to meet these certain thresholds for us to consider them. So one is to locate and develop an enclosed area for off-leash dogs in a primarily non-residential area. And so you'll see in our report that there are a bunch of venues that were proposed that would meet that standard. Another is to have off-leash in a few strategic locations throughout Los Altos that are already, like the hyper focus would be, they're already being used routinely for off-leash daily use. And can we spread the load across the city? And the third that's related to this is, could we rotate among parks? Again, to spread the impact on any one park, could we rotate off-leash, and even a monthly pop-up alternative, for instance, and which would be almost more of an event-based off-leash. And then finally, the one is sort of formalizing existing behavior. The other alternative we have on the table is off-leash for all locations, but putting these guardrails in to somehow bring the use down to what it is today, which is 1 or 2 dogs at a time that are off leash, not 20 gathering at once. So thank you. Thank you for allowing us the time to present. And now we're happy to answer clarifying questions.
So thank you very much to the subcommittee. I have to commend you guys, did a very thorough job, and I appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and have some clarifying questions right now. I would caution everybody to avoid really discussing the issue until we've heard from the public. And I'll get us started. Does the subcommittee or staff know if anybody has measured the sound of the dogs in decibels?
No, I'm not aware of
I
it.
don't believe that was done, no.
And the answer to the second part of that question is probably also no then, because I'm curious to how it compares to the decibel level of a baseball and an aluminum bat and a baseball game. Or for that matter, a lawnmower or anything else.
We don't have that information.
Noted. How about measuring the distance from the dog park to any of the residents? Were any of those measurements taken?
No.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ye, you have a question?
No, this is just going forward. I didn't go to the park that often, but if you want to measure decibels, there's an app that you can just download for your phone. Just going forward.
Yeah, it's, I don't want to get into a discussion, but it's easily done, and there are numerous city ordinances that pertain to decibel levels. For example, if you want to put your air conditioner in your side yard, you know, it has to meet certain requirements for sound. So we should look into it. Other clarifying questions? Commissioner Wang.
In your presentation, the section where you had the photos and you showed the wear and tear and the brown spots, was it your kind of hypothesis that that was sort of more extraordinary wear and tear and those brown spots because of the dogs, or was it sort of some of the other conditions, you know, with water, irrigation, the weather, and that might have caused that? So not sort of exclusively attributed to the increase in dog activity.
Well, I would appreciate, Manny, if you could weigh in on this, because I thought he would have a better perspective historically on this.
Thank you. To be real concise on that answer, it is directly related to the dogs. Being that the off-leash, the experience I have with off-leash programs or off-leash programs in other cities, agencies, they're usually spread out. There's multiple. This one being so concentrated to just one area, there did seem to be more traffic than I've experienced or seen in other programs. And just directly, my staff, my crew members did see dogs digging from a distance, because we tried to stay away as much as possible from that area, but we did see dogs actually digging. And there's, without doing any analysis, but there were paw prints in the dirt, and this was from month 1. So yes, the middle of the field damage was directly done by the dogs. The raccoon activity was later on. There was a transition between the contractor, the community center, and our parks crew with the irrigation system, but that has been remedied now. But yes, it is directly related to the traffic and the digging.
Do we have any other clarifying questions? Commissioner Valadez. Commissioner Valadez, go ahead.
I was unmuting. Thank you, Commissioner Daly, and thank you, Commissioners Morris and Corrigan, for a very thorough report. And I really appreciate the fact that you put your sweat equity into it, actually visiting the park many times and visiting neighbors. I have a few questions. I won't direct them to any single person. You guys can decide who's going to answer. First, did you folks consult any professional dog park designers or providers of dog park, what you'd call assets, particularly fencing fees, to find out what alternatives might exist in those arenas, and how they might affect your ideas about alternatives and recommendations.
Do you want to comment, share more?
Well, right, because I think Commissioner Corrigan wasn't here when the pilot program started and was being hammered out, I don't think. No, we didn't hire anybody. Certainly spoke with people from other cities that have dog parks. Got input at the workshops from them as well. In addition, some of the members of staff have experience with dog parks, and so they weighed in and helped with the dog park criteria and details.
Okay, and in those discussions, did anybody ever mention portable fencing? The idea of portable fencing?
No, it didn't come
Okay.
up. There, what came up, if I may just clarify for a moment, was that people did not want fencing in the parks in Los Altos. So we moved forward based on that information that people did not want the parks fenced in Los Altos, period, perimeter or otherwise. So that's how we came up with what we came up with.
Okay. Next, it's an observation, and then I'll ask my question because it's relevant to the observation. Listening to your data, it seems that, and it was highlighted in Commissioner Corrigan's final comments, that dogs, this off-leash behavior, de facto off-leash behavior that happens throughout the city, it kind of works in a de facto ways for two reasons, it seems. I heard you say or intimate that people are usually one-on-one with their dogs, or they're isolated, they're on their own, and they let their dog off leash and nobody gets in a tussle and nobody barks because the dogs are with their owners. Or there are some small groups, unofficial groups that gather, but in those groups, they seem to know each other, the dogs know each other, and they possibly are not disrupting the area around them. In your conversations with any of your neighbors, with any of the visitors to the park or users of the park, or amongst yourselves, did you ever talk about the idea of, it's kind of out there, of allowing off-leash everywhere in Los Altos, but still complement that perhaps with smaller targeted fenced-in dog parks for those that need it? Maybe they have immature dogs, maybe they have dogs that need more training. But to basically allow off-leash everywhere as a way of dispersing off-leash dogs so that they don't gather and cause problems.
You know, I may have to ask Director Hernandez if he recalls. My recollection was that that may have come up, but there's quite a divide. We mentioned this in the report. There's quite a divide between those who want off-leash and those who don't. And so the idea of putting it in all of the parks, there's opposition in a number of the parks. And Hillview was the one and only park that did not have opposition when we were coming up with locations. It bubbled to the top in the workshop. So in the workshops, that was not one of the options that we presented.
Okay.
By the time we got to the workshops, that was not one of the things.
And if I may just add, I was actually the Director of Recreation and Community Services when this discussion started several years ago. And what the initial plan was to mimic what other agencies do and have multiple off-leash areas for the reasons that I've previously stated. So that was actually changed by council. So council directed 1 to 2 locations, and when those 2 locations were discussed, it was narrowed down to this one. So it was a council direction finally.
Thank you, Director. All right, that pretty much concludes my clarifying questions at this time.
Okay, if we don't have any other clarifying questions, let's go ahead and turn to public comment. And again, I will remind the public that we're going to limit individual comments to 2 minutes so that everybody has an opportunity to be heard without staying up too late. And also we will allow residents to cede time. I understand there are a couple of situations already where that is where some folks are planning to do that. The protocol for how we handle that: the residents who are ceding time should be present, and when queried, they should say, yes, I'm ceding my time to so-and-so. And even though we're going to go ahead and limit the individual comments to 2 minutes, we will maintain the 10 minutes allotted for people who have had time ceded to them. Casey, I will turn it over to you to orchestrate the logistics for public comment.
Okay. My first public speaker is going to be Lisa Deegan. The members of the public that are ceding their time to Lisa, I believe, are Bet, and I'm really sorry on pronunciation of names, but Bet Hutchins, Steve Hutchins, Larry Barron, and Trisha Jordan. So I do have some of these people present right now. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Larry because I see him right at the top. So I will temporarily promote Larry to panelist. Larry, I just need you to state your name and state who you are ceding your time to. He's still muted. Give me just a second. Larry, are you there? Larry, oh, there you are. Okay. If you could say your name and state who you are ceding your time to. So it's still muted. If you can give me a thumbs up if you are ceding your time to Lisa Deegan. Thank you. I will stop your video for now because that's what I can do, and I will count your time for Lisa. Thank you. This will be a slow process. I apologize. I have Trisha Jordan. Oh, I have Bet here. So I'm going to go ahead and move Bet now. That will be the second person for Lisa Deegan.
Hello?
Oh, we hear you, Bet. If you could state your name and state who you're ceding your time for.
Bet Houchins. I'm ceding my time to Lisa Deegan, and my husband is right here, too.
Okay, Steve, can you also verbally state those things?
Yes, this is Steve Houchins, and I cede my time to Lisa Deegan.
Thank you both very much.
And you're actually going to find Trisha Jordan with Larry Barron.
We're working on it right now.
Alrighty.
Thank you. Okay, give me just a moment. I apologize for the slowness. This is a different way of doing it for this webinar format, and so we just want to make sure that we don't exclude someone from the meeting, but we also don't want to.
Casey, are you promoting each person that seeds to a panelist?
So unfortunately for this particular type of webinar, that is the only way to do it.
So they can't just call in and then speak?
If you call in, so this is listed in the, not the agenda, but in the meeting details. If you call in, you cannot speak. If you call in, you are an observer only. You have to join the meeting via the webinar link. And if you join the meeting via a webinar link, I can promote you to panelist long enough to speak or long enough to cede your time. So it does take just a moment to do that piece. I do have a written motion here for Trisha Jordan to cede her time to Lisa. And so if Chair Daly will accept that, then I will move Lisa to the first speaking position, and Lisa Deegan will have 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely, Casey. And I'm seeing some chatter in the Q&A that would indicate there's some desire on the part of folks to just do that. So where you see that, let's just go ahead and
I'm going to promote Lisa
make it
to
happen.
panelist momentarily.
Hello.
Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
So the position of the city clerk is that you not turn on your video.
Oh gosh, can people? I didn't think. Okay, sorry.
This is what it's been before. So you just speak.
Okay.
Speak like that verbally. I will put up a 10-minute timer. So if you don't see it momentarily, please let me know.
I see it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. My name's Lisa. I'm here to represent over 300 plus Los Altos residents in favor of the dog park pilot program. You provided us a dog park and we showed up in Groves. This experiment demonstrated several things. Number one, it showed a huge need in our community for dog owners to have a place to take their dogs off leash, walking distance from our homes, just like our neighboring cities and communities have. There were also some issues. We'll address them. However, we know they are issues that can be solved, and we want to work together with you and have your support on them. Number one, we heard you loud and clear during the City Council's 9/21 meeting. Council made it very clear that safety and liability was their top priority. This experiment was put together without an enclosed fence, so several of these issues should not be a surprise. Adding a fence for containment would solve the majority of the issues on this program. A fence would ensure the safety for all residents walking or passing by the park or through it. It would provide a barrier for any maintenance staff and any other park personnel. It would prevent dogs from leaving the off-leash field area and even entering the Little League area. So I also spoke with the head of Little League, and he was totally willing to work with us, had no problem with dogs being there, and we'd be willing to completely work around their hours. So bottom line, fence would really, really help solve a lot of issues. Number two, compatibility. This represents all the stakeholders involved because this is a community asset. Their needs should be addressed. We want everyone to know we are considering everyone involved. Neighbors, we talk to our neighbors. We know noise and security are a concern. A fence and different hours can help solve these issues. Police, rules need to be clear and enforceable so the police and code enforcement can use their time productively. Park and recs, we recognize this is a community resource. We need to keep and maintain high quality fields. So this is also available for other programs and activities. You know, for example, digging. We are on it, making sure that dogs are not disrupting this. I do believe in the beginning there were more holes, and as we got, you know, we realized this was going to be a problem, we were on it. So now I don't see any ruts in our holes. Little League, the priority should go for them when a game or a field, or I'm sorry, when a game or a practice is in session. Maintenance, they want minimal impact to their fields. So using it responsibly, ensuring their safety when they're working is important. A fence would only be a benefit. So we look forward to collaborating with everyone on this. So the dry patches, we were told were due because water was actually shut off for a long time. History Museum. They are neighbors too. We're willing to work with them to keep them happy. Next steps. Why do we think it's solvable as dog owners? What we've learned and what we need to do to support to make this work. The dog owners have been diligent with their dogs and other dogs, stopping digging, minimizing barking, being on alert when new dogs arrive, keeping dogs off the infield, picking up poop, paying attention when other dogs walk by or enter the park, knowing where our dogs are at all times. It takes a village, and we've worked really hard together to be very responsible about this. And given the support of so many Los Altos residents and the demonstrated need in our community, as Los Altos is a pet-friendly town with a 75-year-old pet parade, we have pet-friendly restaurants downtown, but we have no dog park for off-leash play for our community. This Parks and Recs Commission is dedicated to enabling recreational opportunities, and we've proven that this is significant and a needed one. We need your support in helping us to advance the efforts for Los Altos residents to have a dog park. Let's work together to make this successful for our community. This is what council expected of us, and this is what our 300+ members are eager to do. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, I'll end it here and allow others to speak, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa. I do have a quick question.
Sure.
300 people. Can you please tell me or tell the commission who comprises the 300 people that you're representing and how you come
All
up
people
with
in
that
our
estimate?
community. Absolutely, absolutely. We put together a survey and went around and asking people, you know, if they wanted this dog park and if they would support it. And they all signed it and gave us email addresses, their names, and said, we are in support of a dog park. And it was over 300, and I apologize that I don't have the exact number. I was not on that committee. I'm the spokesperson.
I appreciate that. That's you don't need to have the exact number, but understanding the magnitude is important to us. We
Sure.
appreciate you for that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question.
I just wanted, since you asked Chair Daly, I did want to remind all commissioners that after each public comment, you are allowed to ask clarifying questions from the public commenter.
Right. Just a friendly reminder, that's not a discussion or an engagement with the public. It's just to gather a little bit more information if there's something that we need to put their feedback in context.
Correct. Okay. The next public speaker that I have is Mehmet Devisi. I will get over to Mehmet. He does have one person. It's Anastasia Irisides, who has said she would cede her time. So I'm double checking. She is here, so I'm going to allow.
Because I hear.
I'm going to allow her to talk first. So Anastasia, are you there? Anastasia?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you verbally state who you are and who you are?
Sorry, 1 second.
It's okay.
I can't hear you, but I'm Anastasia Urides, and I cede my time to Mehmet Deveci.
Thank you. Okay, now I will give time to Mehmet. He will have 4 minutes. Give me just a moment to find him. Okay. Mehmet, you should be able to speak now.
Hello. Yeah, I assume you can hear me, although I cannot hear you. But I will just.
We can't hear you. Give me just a moment to make sure that your time clock is up. I have.
It's 4 minutes, but yeah, I will just start my comment then.
Yes.
So I want to talk that I strongly support the OffLeash program in the Hillview, and I am disappointed with the report regarding the pilot. The report states that the pilot failed in terms of incidents, field condition, and unlawful activity. In terms of the incidents, safety-related issues could have been addressed with the installation of the fences that the residents have been asking from the beginning. For the field condition, we all understand that the use of the park by dogs and owners have associated wear and tear damages. But I am bothered by the efforts that blame the dogs for the field damages that are in fact caused by crows or raccoons or improper watering during a hot summer season. For this, I appreciate if you can check my email that I sent to Ms. Donna Leggy, where I provided picture evidence that shows the soccer field in the next door is in actually no better condition than the Hillview Park. It has a lot more dry patches and there is no dog activity in this field. I also provided pictures that in the Hillview Park, there are very nicely arc-shaped dry patches that if you find the center, there is a sprinkler, and like this is more likely to happen due to the improper watering. I also provided historical images from the satellite pictures of the Google Earth from 2017 and 18, and most of these dry patches exist in the park before, and they keep currently happening in the very nice patterns of these circles. I also disagree with the statement that the pilot did not decrease the unauthorized off-leash use of the Los Altos parks. If this was a success criteria, it appears that the pilot was set for a failure from the very beginning with absurd dog park hours. At this point, the only meaningful evaluation that can take place is by looking at whether there was a decrease in the unauthorized off-leash use of Los Altos Park from 7 to 9 a.m. and p.m. Any other evaluation is not justifiable, and it is not a representation of what would happen if you provided more reasonable dog park hours. So now let me tell you why the pilot was a success for me. So I'm an immigrant in the USA for the last 10 years, and I lived in Los Altos less than 2 years. And thanks to the Hillview Park, for the first time I met my neighbors, I built relations with a very diverse group of people with different ethnicities and ages. During COVID, my wife and I had a wedding canceled, ended up having only an online wedding and a newborn baby with no support. We were completely away from our families who live in overseas, and our neighbors that we met through the Hillview Park were the only people we shared these moments, and they were the only one that gave us support. So this says a lot about the character of the community that the Hillview Park not only enabled, but also fostered. So now running into the fellow dog park neighbors and being able to chat with them while walking on the streets and downtown make me feel like I lived here not more than the last 2 years. It feels like home, a small town that I grew up and lived in my whole life. This gives me the feeling of belonging even as an outsider. So the pilot to me was a success. I also like to mention that if you come to the dog park more than a couple times, you will recognize me as the guy who constantly kicked the ball for several of the dogs. I build all these relations while still engaging and constantly watching over my dogs, unlike many claims I heard, socializing interfere with people paying attention to their dogs. Lastly, I'd like to say that there are future promises without certain timeline, and they are unsettling. And it is a sign for another 10 to 20 years of endless dog park discussion. I hope that you will reconsider the report and consider my statements, making a decision for the future. But that ends my comments. I unfortunately cannot hear when you, if there is any question, I can answer, but I cannot hear while my mic is on.
Commissioner Ye, you have a question?
No, I had a comment on his emails. So his email was really long and really detailed, and I want to thank Mehmet for that.
Is there a question for me? I'm sorry, I cannot really hear. I just see the video, but I cannot really hear. Is there any way that?
Can we put a question in chat for him? Is there any way to do that?
Anyone who is a panelist cannot type into the chat. I can text him.
Does someone have a question? Because I don't.
No, I thought you did.
Okay, no, I wanted to comment on his email.
If you can type the question as well, I can try. I'm very sorry, I cannot hear anything.
Okay, so his email, when I read his email, I did look up Google Earth and looked up historic images on the park, and what he is saying is exactly true. The dry spots appear annually, kind of in the same places. So that's
I
just kind
don't
of.
think this is allowed right now. This is part
Yeah,
of discussion. We're allowed to ask a question.
Vice Chair Morris, I'll take care of it. Commissioner Ye, we're just doing clarification questions right now. I think your points would have merit in the later discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have several additional requests for public comment. So the next one has disappeared. Oh, okay, here she is. So I will allow Zahara Ardahali to speak. Zahara, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. I'm going to start your 2-minute timer right now.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Zahara Ardahali and I live in Los Altos. I've been in Los Altos over 20 years and I built 2 homes here and I live very near Grand Park. I think with this pilot, contrary to the previous speakers, I think this pilot shows that we need to go back to what we actually started with, which is the request to have a dog park, not off-leash hours within the limited number of parks that we have. We have very limited number of parks in Los Altos. The space is very restricted to children, to playgrounds, to games, and public, especially elderly, and the rest of the people in the neighborhood that they're using the park. Allocating off-leash hours disturbs the residents, disturbs the neighbors, disturbs the children, and the priorities are going to be affected of the people and especially the children in the park. So I highly recommend that. This has been a topic for over, I don't know how many years that I've been here. I would recommend that the commissioners go back to the main topic, which is having a dog park, not off-leash hours. Off-leash hours are disturbing to the residents, and it actually has enforced off-leash dogs more in the other parks.
You have 30
I live near
seconds
Grand
remaining.
Park. I live near Grand Park, and I've seen an increased number of off-leash because there is an impression that off-leash is allowed in parks, and this not having a dedicated location for it, it has an impact on other parks, and I think it doesn't bring discipline to the residents who have dogs. Rather, it takes away the discipline, and we have a chaos. Grand Park is affected because of these new off-leash hours. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you. If there are any questions specific about Grand Park, I'll be happy to answer because I see a lot of off-leash, increased number of off-leash since this pilot program has started.
Are there any commissioner questions? Okay. Give me just a moment. The next person I have is Wes. I'm going to allow Wes to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Give me just a moment and I will begin your 2-minute time period. You may begin. Oh,
Thank you. I've been pretty consistent in saying that I am quite in favor of a gathering place for dogs. I believe in community building. My wife and I host block parties in our neighborhood, and we're all for it. I walk through the Hillview area on average once, twice, sometimes 3 times a day with and without our leashed dog. Our dog was attacked 3 times by unleashed dogs in unprovoked attacks. They were brutal attacks. They terrified me. They traumatized our dog, and they would have been avoided or at least mitigated by the use of a fence in that area. If you look up the definition of dog park, you'll see different words, but they all focus around enclosed or fenced. So it's disingenuous to continue to speak of this off-leash area as a dog park if you're not going to talk about a fence. I'm surprised, disappointed, and angered that fencing is still a question that is being considered. It should be a no-brainer to put a fence up there. And not a perimeter fence, but a designated fence with a designated dog area. Speaking of that, Hillview is the wrong place. You're fooling yourself if you think you can maintain that as a multi-use baseball field and still have dogs there. It's not going to work. All due respect to the Little League commissioner and Little League players there. I walk through there almost every day since the trial period started.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
I have not seen a single person throwing a Frisbee, throwing a baseball, doing cartwheels or anything else like that. And the dogs are just going to maintain that area as a designated dog area. If it's going to be a designated dog area, I'd wonder why we put up the 20-foot fences. That money could have been used to pay for 4-foot fences to go around that area. So please put in a fence, but move it from Hillview. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Are there any commissioner questions?
I have a quick question for Wes. Thank you for your remarks. Did you report the attacks that occurred, Wes? I wonder if it's part of the data that we've seen.
It's part of, but we weren't all of them. There were others because we did report them. There's also letters on file with the city council with police incident reports.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any others? Okay. The next person I have is Jean Ferroglia. I'm sorry, Jean. Are you able to speak now?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay.
So I apologize. I'll go ahead and start your timer, and you can tell us your name the way that it's actually pronounced.
It's Jean Ferolia. When COVID first started, the community center was under development and access was limited on one side. The field was no longer in use. Allowing dogs on the park during COVID made a lot of sense. I fully supported it. Now that we are moving out of COVID, this is no longer the case. The center is complete and people would like to use the park as a park. Many people have been pushed aside because of the current dog park use. With no supervision, it's basically an all-day dog park. The number of dogs in the park has continued to grow and the barking has increased exponentially in the morning and in the evening. There are many groups that have been displaced from the park, from families, picnicking to sports and everything in between. Many have been displaced because of the off-leash environment. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. Skyhawk Sports no longer wants to rent the field because of kids on the grass. They don't think it's safe. On-leash dog owners have been moved away from Hillview, and this is a shame, and a very large group. I think there's actually more on-leash dog owners than there are off-leash. I strongly endorse the park's recommendation to discontinue the off-leash program at the Hillview baseball field. However, I do believe what is needed is a dedicated dog park at the Hillview complex. I think the area of the park mentioned in their report would be ideal, the one near the soccer field. According to the Santa Clara Parks Department, a successful park needs to be enclosed with a perimeter fence, easy to maintain, benches, shade, and open all day. A dedicated park is necessary, and I support that effort, and the location near the soccer field would be an ideal location and less disruptive to all. And lastly, I don't know if the off-leash dog owners really understand 9 months out of the year, it's going to be impacted by baseball and by the park being closed for maintenance. That's not good for the off-leash dog owners to be impacted for 9 months out of 12.
I'm so sorry. I didn't give you a 30-second time limit. You have just reached your 2 minutes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
I apologize. Okay, there are additional. Okay, it looks like we have someone named Jeff Beckman who would like to speak. Jeff, are you able to unmute yourself? Jeff, I've sent you a request to unmute yourself. Jeff,
Can you hear me now?
we can hear you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to pass.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. I see I forgot to lower my hand. Thank you.
It's no problem. Give me just a second to get out of that portion. Okay. It looks like our next, we have a number, and it's actually a number, not a name, but I will promote this person. And we have a number that starts with 481.
I believe that's Frank. I believe that's Frank Martin.
That's Frank Martin.
I think it is Frank Martin.
Hello.
Hi, Frank.
Hi, this is Frank Martin. I live in Los Altos since 1976. I've
It's
walked
your
my
turn.
dog. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, all right. After reading the subcommittee report and hearing what I heard today, it's quite obvious to me that the Parks and Recs Commission did a lot of work, but unfortunately came up empty when it came to doing anything useful for dog owners like myself. The location and pilot hours that you chose were absurd and basically, unfortunately, are not appropriate for a dog park at the Little League field. You've also learned today what we already knew 12 years ago. If you ask who likes dog parks and who doesn't, you're going to have basically a divided town. Dog owners want it and non-dog owners do not. Unfortunately, the non-dog owners are so crazy about this, they wouldn't give us 1 second or 1 minute on any dog park for any reason whatsoever. And we also know that dogs are going to be off leash regardless of what you do or you don't do. So I've waited 12 years for a pilot program, and now I'm waiting another year and nothing's happened. I'm 79 years old. It would be nice to have a dog park before I die. My friends in Los Altos that supported the dog park idea have moved on because when you dither around like you guys have done, bad things happen. Dogs die, people move away, and people lose interest. So now we have a new group. Thank heavens for them.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds remaining.
All I can tell you is a friend of mine that left Los Altos and moved to Seattle tells me that every town allows dogs off leash and they all get along fine, just like I do when I basically play with my dog in another town because I cannot do it at Grant Park. The lady at Grant Park exhibits the behavior I mentioned. She doesn't like dogs and doesn't want dogs. So you'll have to decide what to do. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Teresa?
I have one for Frank. I wondered if he used the off-leash pilot program at all at Hillview, and if he did, approximately how many times?
I never used it because it requires a 6.5 mile drive, and I can basically go off leash every day, and I do, at another park that's a mile away. We've been doing it for almost 10 years. We have no problems whatsoever. We share the park with soccer kids. We share the kids with baseball field. We all get along. We keep our dogs away from the people playing baseball and soccer. They keep away from us. When they want to use our space, we move on. Everybody understands the rules. Dogs do leave holes in the ground. We actually patch the holes like that other lady tried to tell you. And so when you have a community, it takes care of itself. And in our case, when people get sick, we help them. A lady died of cancer. We gave her wigs. We took her to the park. We did all kinds of nice things. We have social outings. It builds community. And at my age, all the friends I currently have, I met because of my dog. Without my dog, I have no friends.
Thanks, Frank. Thank you. Commissioner Valadez, do you have a question for Frank Martin?
I do. Mr. Martin, if fenced in dog park at a park local to your home, would you use it? And that I only need to know yes or no.
Absolutely, and I asked for a fence repeatedly, but this commission totally ignored me. In Menlo Park, they not only fence in the perimeter, they fence in the playgrounds so that dogs and kids are kept separate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to, if I may, Chair Daly, I want to ask a clarifying question now to Frank.
Okay, sure.
Frank, fenced in, would you use a small fenced in park or a large, like if the perimeter of Grant Park were fenced in, or the perimeter of Hillview? Just yes to small or no?
The entire park needs to be fenced in, and not a small dog park.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Give me just a moment. We have two final hands raised. One is, and I actually can't see the full name, but it starts with Marta.
Hi.
Marta, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me just a moment and I will start your 2 minutes.
Perfect.
You may begin.
Okay, excellent. I really don't even believe that anything I'll say will change anybody's mind, but I just want to, say my piece. First and foremost, I think it's crazy to think if you put all the dogs of Hillview in one field, expect the field will look the same as it did in the beginning. So that was the first and foremost thing. I think another thing is we've heard there's a lot of vicious attacks happening at the field. I am one of the few parents that actually show up there with small babies. I come with my 6-month-old baby, so I don't think anything crazy is happening there, because if it would, I wouldn't bring a small child there. And then I think one of the last things is, I think you guys not giving us an option to have a dog park and then sending animal control, giving us tickets. It is the craziest thing I've heard in my life. It is the same as telling Los Altos residents, you have to walk on sidewalks or we're gonna give you a ticket, but there's no sidewalks to walk in Los Altos. So it just makes no sense to anybody. And finally, I live in downtown, so when Art and Wine Festival happens, obviously it doesn't work in my favor. I'm not the biggest fan of it. People park in front of my house. It's busy, it's not calm, but that doesn't mean that you're gonna stop Art and Wine Festival because I'm not a fan of it. And this is basically what is happening from this. And I know it's 30 seconds.
30 seconds remaining.
I know, yes. And I think the lastly is, the only thing we've learned from this whole report and this whole thing that we heard today is that if we threaten a lawsuit, then maybe we'll get a dog park. Because basically these guys said, if you do this, we're going to have a lawsuit. So now you don't want to do it. Thank you.
Are there any clarifying questions? Okay. I do have one final person. I have Alon Amit, who would like to speak.
Thank you.
If you'll give me just a second, I will start your 2-minute timer. You may begin.
First, I do want to thank the committee for the pilot program and for the very detailed report. I want to express strong support for the continuation of the OffLeash program at Hillview Park, with the amendments and the community support that Lisa has detailed in the beginning. It's clear that we need a fence. It's clear that the community needs to get together and ensure the safety and happiness of all, and we are certain that we can manage the OffLeash program in conjunction with the Little League and other activities in this park. By the numbers cited by the committee, we have about 30,000 residents in Los Altos. We heard that 35% are dog owners, and about half of those surveyed said that they would want to use an OffLeash program. We're talking about thousands of dog owners in Los Altos who literally have zero parks, 0 hours of the day, 0 days of the week to have an off-leash activity for their dogs. I understand completely the concerns of the neighbors, and their safety has to be ensured, and we can ensure it with community support and with appropriate fencing. But putting that on the balance with thousands of dog owners who literally have in the entire city of Los Altos no park to
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Yep, to take their dogs off leash sounds unreasonable to me as a balance. Every decision this committee makes is a balancing act, but I think we should consider the magnitude of the community and the huge benefit to the community building that this little program has provided over the months it has been on. And you've heard from myself and from others over email about this. Thank you again.
Are there any clarifying questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Valadez, did you have a clarifying question? I'll have to promote a meet again.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Oh, Alon, a meet. Okay, Alon, there you go.
Hello, sir. My question is very simple. I hope it can be answered with yes or no. If a dog park, one or more dog parks was established in the city other than Hillview, would you benefit from that and attend?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. And in the meantime, I did have one additional person raise their hand to speak. Okay, Chair Daly, I'm going to promote Nancy.
Hello.
Give me just a moment and I will start your timer, Nancy. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't planned to speak, but I just wanted to make a few comments. About a week and a half before the pilot was initially scheduled to end, I went to walk around the community center and also to walk around and see the dog park. And as I left the community center and I was still behind the fence area, I kid you not, I was probably 20 feet on the other side of the fence from where the opening was. There were 5 dogs on the other side, on the walkway side of the fence. So I was still behind the fence. No dog owners looked over and called their dogs to say, you know, come back, Fido or whatever. One lady quietly did come get her dog, and some of them were then meandering in the trees. I saw one poop, and I didn't see anybody come over to clean it up. As I continued walking around to the other side, 2 balls were thrown across my path, and of course, underfoot came two dogs at different moments, not at the same moment, to come and retrieve the ball. So I guess as I've been around a lot of elderly people, I consider that a real tripping hazard. I agree with a lot of the people that a fence, so that people walking around would be on the outside of the fence, not near the dogs, would fix that problem. I think that noise is a problem. I think if you live near a park, I live near a park, but not that one. If you were to hear dogs barking for a long time, that would be a problem.
30 seconds remaining.
And I still think having dogs off leash without a fence is bad. There's no experience with having people play like in the infield in the same areas where dogs are. So you're really making a choice between people and dogs. And so think about that with off leash and no fence. And that's it. Thank you.
It looks like we have another resident who would like to speak. I do want to remind residents that we are all neighbors and we all live in the same community, and although we may disagree, I think we all owe each other a certain amount of courtesy. So let's try to avoid any personal interactions between the residents who are exercising their rights to comment.
Sorry, I was muted. And for the record, all of those comments will be recorded in the public record. They are downloaded as part of this meeting, and they will be included as public comment. So prior to that comment, I had one hand raised, but Chair Daly, I no longer have any hands raised to speak on this issue.
Looks like one hand. Well, okay. All right. At this time, I would like to recess for 8 minutes and come back at 9:20. So let's have an opportunity to take care of whatever we need to do in the next 8 minutes, and I will see everybody here at 9:20.
I will set that right now.
Okay, so it looks like we're back. We are about to embark on our discussion. I would like to, well, I guess I'll wait for Vice Chair Morris. Here we got Commissioner Wang is back. All right, so what's up, Casey?
I would just like to note that all chat is part of the public record, and it is saved. It is attached. We will have a list of it, so if anyone has any concerns about anything that is said in the chat to or from members of the public, to commissioners, etc., the public chat is saved and it is part of the public record. So we will keep track of that. I don't think that needs to be an issue for right this minute.
Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're about to embark on our discussion, and I would like to just set some expectations for this discussion. It's my intention to hear from everybody, and rather than have a lot of back and forth, I would prefer to do this in an orderly way. And so if everybody will have an opportunity to make their point of view known and to comment and so forth, but basically I want to hear from everybody before people get a second or third or fourth bite at the apple to speak. So be prepared to say what you need to say, and then we'll proceed in an orderly fashion in that regard. Commissioner Wang.
Sorry, I just had a question. Excuse me. Is the outcome here of the discussion to arrive at a decision? Like, what is the decision, to continue or not continue, or sort of just...
That's a good question. Hang on a second, Manny. We are not obligated to make a recommendation to council. If we are unable to advance a motion, then nothing will happen. However, it's my expectation that we will make a motion to recommend a course of action for the council. And that's my objective for us coming out of this discussion. We definitely need to go around the table, so to speak, though, and hear from everybody before I would entertain, that would be my preference, at least, to hear from everybody before entertaining a motion. So,
Chair Daly, can I read one thing before
yes,
continue? The agenda item says, receive the dog park subcommittee report and recommend to City Council the continuation or discontinuation of the off-leash program of the off-leash program at the Hillview baseball field.
So that's our task, but as I said, we do not have to advance a recommendation. There are 6 of us here tonight, and if we split, we're not going to be able to advance a recommendation. So
that is accurate.
We're going to have to work to come up with something that a majority of us, meaning 4 or more, can vote for. So yes, Commissioner Valadez.
Question. So now I understand the question of the meeting, and I'm glad that Casey reread it so that we could expound that here. However, my question is this: should we vote? Would it be reasonable? I mean, I'm sorry. Is it possible for us to vote to either continue or discontinue the program, and in each of those cases have either provisos or further action required? Could we eliminate that in our motion and then seek agreement or denial on that basis?
Yeah, I can't know in advance whether a motion is going to be in order or out of order, but in general terms, we can make a more sophisticated recommendation than just cancel it or extend it, for sure. Yeah, so let's go ahead and start with okay, Director Hernandez.
One thing I raised my hand earlier just to actually state what Casey stated. So thank you, Casey, for getting that out there. That's the directive. And let me just emphasize in that this is a recommendation. So for any of the audience members or the commissioners, understanding that a decision here does not mean that this program either continues or ceases. This is just a recommendation to council to take action on that. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Actually, yeah, let's do that. Let's just go ahead and start with the discussion. I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to Vice Chair Morris, being the senior person on the subcommittee, and hear from her first if she's ready.
Well, if it's okay, I'd like to hear from the other commissioners because I feel like I've settled. I mean, I'm hoping that we come to a decision. I'm hoping that people are considering our recommendations. I do think it's important to note that the field conditions, just so everybody can have a little more clarity about this, we are 100% aware that there were confounding variables that came up with the field use. So we know that for a short period of time, water was not being watered for a really short amount of time. And I understand it was just a blink of a short amount of time. And then there was a small period of time recently where it was being overly watered, and that's where the puddles were coming from. The watering has been an issue the entire time, though, for dog owners, in that it's moist in the morning. But the issue of like the raccoons and that sort of thing, that came up later, appears to be connected to when there was overwatering. I was very aware when I went to the field that that was raccoon activity. I told dog owners, I know 100% that's not dog activity, it's raccoon activity. They pull things up in little tufts, so it was quite obvious that it wasn't dogs. So I think the field, all that does is take us to a place where we go, great, we don't really know 100% what this field would look like if we hadn't had these variables come up. And the other huge variable is we didn't have Little League impact. So, and then in addition to that, we also have aerial photos where the field looks great and the baseball field looks great and the soccer field doesn't look great. And we have the soccer field looking great and the baseball field. So we have all of these different pictures that come up. Our main takeaway from what we were observing is there are worn spots, and there are spots that are definitely more worn down as a result of the increased dog activity and human activity. And in the report, we wrote about compaction of the soil. That could be due to, having the water decreased and it wouldn't sink in. It could also be from the sheer number of people that were walking and standing and dogs that were running on the field. So we really can't come up with a set, like this is it. This is the reason the field is this way. But we can say that it was worse in recent time than it had been in the past, and it was certainly worse than when it started. So I did want to bring that up, and I also want to thank the people that called in and were respectful and gave us their information and ideas. And the other thing is I wanted to address petitions just briefly is that we've had petitions come before the commission, both for and against, and the amount of signers, basically, they kind of cancel each other out. We looked at all of the other petitions that have come in over the period of time when we were doing the workshops and having this discussion before. So wanted to bring that up. The other thing is this location, the details of the location and how the pilot program was rolled out was based on our workshops, and it was based on the commission getting input from staff and from other park commissioners also, and from the public. And that's how this program was rolled out. Again, it's a pilot program. It was there to teach us things. It was there to see if it would work or not work. And we learned a lot. And so those are the basic things that I've been thinking about as far as from listening to comments, and I hope to learn a lot more from the commissioners about if we need to answer any questions. Thanks for the time.
Commissioner Corrigan.
Well, thanks, Chair Daly. I'm not sure I can add a whole lot to what Vice Chair Morris said. I agree. I guess my point was when we did this report, we made sure that our goal was to evaluate the pilot. You know, this whole report was structured to go, this is what the council said we should use to judge the success or, you know, or challenges with the pilot, and that's what we did. And so I hope the audience understands that. We understand all of the benefits of off-leash to the community, but we try to adhere to the criteria, and I hope our fellow commissioners will keep that in mind. And secondly, I think it's important to know that it was a pilot, and a pilot's a pilot. The whole point of a pilot is to learn. So we had a lot of good learnings that we can apply to future alternatives should we proceed in that direction. I'd like to keep that in mind, and otherwise I obviously would support the recommendation we put at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Okay. I guess we'll just go in terms of seniority for the rest of the group here. Commissioner Ye.
Yeah, first, thanks, Chair Daly. First of all, thanks to Commissioners Corrigan and Vice Chair Morris. That was a lot of work I saw you guys put into this, and going there, 80 times or something, that's really, really helpful, because I definitely didn't do that. So for my thoughts on this is, from the public comments that came through the emails, it seems like the people who have dogs understand that, you know, it's great and that there are some issues with the maintenance of the fields. And for the people who don't want it, there's a whole host of reasons why that makes sense too. But again, Teresa did say that this is a pilot program, and I believe the city learned quite a bit during this process. Granted, you know, a lot of things like sticking a bunch of dogs in an enclosed area is going to have negative effects, and going forward, that, you know, there are ways to kind of mitigate that. But my feeling is, one of the callers, they have a really salient point here. It is illegal to have a dog off leash in the city of Los Altos. The city has made that the rule here. And then to cite people for taking their dogs off leash, which for a lot of dogs they kind of need to do, is it's a tough situation for the city and the citizens to be in, because it's somewhat hypocritical, but at the same time, I can see where both sides are coming from. Going forward, I think this pilot program was great. I think it worked. One of the callers, Mehmet, his email was really, really well done. Okay. And a lot of the complaints here from the people who do not want any off leash or dog park is that the fields are getting damaged. So kids can't play baseball, or they can't walk across the field, or whatever it is. But historically, these fields aren't always in the best condition anyways. I mean, I grew up here. Like, trying to play baseball, if you weren't wearing a cup, you're gonna have a problem. All right, so I see where everyone's coming from, but at the same time, there are a lot of dogs here, and the fact that we don't provide a place for them is somewhat comical. It's not really what a city should do, especially when it's a large minority of people. I mean, that's like 3,000 to 4,000 dogs. That's over 10% of our population. You know, one of the callers said, imagine if we didn't provide sidewalks. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of parts of Los Altos, we don't have that. And there's handicapped people here. That's not nice to them either, okay? But I understand that, you know, costs and things can get weighed into that decision. But for a dog park, there's so many locations for it. I'm okay with keeping this going. Maybe not at Hillview, but somewhere else.
Thank you. Commissioner Valadez.
I'm going to make a few observations first about comments I read and or heard, and kind of some of the major themes that I heard in my response to those. And then I actually have a statement that I'd like to make in terms of my opinion, I guess, or assessment of what I saw in the report and what I personally observed as well. So first, my observations. There were a lot of comments about how it was great that the park was finally getting used for something. And I dismissed those observations because, you know, if with all due respect, I dismissed them because we've just gone through COVID shutdowns and the normal usage of all of the fields is not normal. Even in other parks in the city where people purportedly go off leash unlawfully, those fields themselves don't have haven't had any formal activities seemingly giving license to people to use them for other activities, including off-leash play. So I kind of, that's a wash for me. Those kinds of comments don't have an impact on me. The other thing that I noticed is that even most of the proponents that want Hillview to continue or have stated the desire to have a dog park, they actually want a fence. So it kind of belies the fact that you know, they're pushing really hard to continue the pilot at Hillview, yet the Hillview field doesn't necessarily meet the need that they realize is there, which is to have containment for dogs, to protect people as well as to protect outside and inside the park or the enclosure, and then also to corral the dogs. So I think that kind of becomes a very important point, and it will become a big part of my statement further down in this discussion. The key thing that I see in regard to that containment and the usage of the park is that we have an unprecedented number of dogs in the city now because of COVID. I mean, everybody knows, you've heard all the media that says everybody got pandemic puppies, and a lot of them are young. And so, you know, you walk downtown any day of the week, any time of the day, and you see, I've lived here for 32 years. I have never seen as many dogs in the city active with their owners, walking down streets downtown as I ever have in the past. And therefore, it seems that we're hitting this major tipping point, if you will, in that the city needs to, I think, and it starts with our commission, needs to take a very proactive view that the city needs to service those dog owners in terms of providing facilities for their dogs to play. But those facilities must be safe, they must be maintainable, and they must be prevalent. So I think fencing is a very critical issue. Some members have claimed, some commenters have claimed to be okay with dogs pooping in areas where kids play, i.e. they push the idea of multi-use. Even some ex-Little League people and some current Little League people have said that. I would question those people if I could, because I recognize a lot of the names. I was involved with Los Altos Little League for 2 decades, and I remember those people being vehement that non-baseball usage should not happen on baseball fields. But now that their kids have moved on, they're older, they're more in the, you know, a different phase of their lives, now they're okay with multi-use. So I think that sports parks and dog parks do not mix. And I think that if people really search inside their history, they will find that that's true. Finally, it seems that, and I kind of commented here in the clarifying question I asked a couple people, which is a lot of times it seems that dogs walking with their owners and then the owner kind of just casually lets them go off leash in a park and they're on their own. For the most part, that dog probably won't cause a problem. That doesn't mean that they should do that. I'm just saying that's a unique situation. You don't have barking because there's no other dog around. You don't have tussling because there's no other dog around. Also, the owner's very watchful over their dog because they know they're probably not doing something they should be doing. And I think that's kind of a false positive, if you will, to argue that fences aren't necessary. I still go back to the fencing. And finally, the claims that damage has always been on our fields and may or may not have been caused by dogs. I think Vice Chair Morris and Commissioner Corrigan have been incredibly gracious, and Director Manny Hernandez have been incredibly gracious in accommodating sentiments such as that. I think that comparing the degradation that happens to a field seasonally because thousands of kids and or adults have been on the field to 20 to 25 dogs, every few days. I mean, the dogs are definitely doing damage, and I think that we'd be naive to say that they're not. And therefore, I personally believe that dog parks need to be away again from functional parks. So now getting to my statement, I'm firmly in favor of off-leash dog parks. I'm a strong proponent of them. I attend them a lot. I went to the Hillview pilot probably 10 times, but I'll tell you why I stopped. I stopped because I have 3 young dogs and they could not be contained under voice control, but I knew they need socialization. So I returned back to going to fenced-in dog parks in other communities. Moreover, I observed a lot of kind of rambunctious behavior, including my dogs, that was out of control and not under the supervision of attentive dog owners. And the way I raise my dogs, by the way, for 32 years living here and even before that, I've always owned multiple dogs, typically 3 to 5 at a time. So I know what it's like to manage a pack and to lead a pack. And I believe that dogs always need to be led by their owners. And the chaos that can occur in an unleashed park can separate the dog from their owner. And that is a behavioral problem that happens in larger parks. And that's why I favor small dog parks. I think instead of 1 or 2 big dog parks in the city, we should have 6 or 7 small dog parks that are anywhere from 600 square feet to 2,500 square feet. That's as big as they need to be. You talk to professional trainers with whom I've worked in the past with previous dogs, not with my puppies yet. They like dog parks, but they should be small so that the dog is always under the understanding that you're there. And then they can be neighborhood. They can be neighborhood parks. It seems to me that that's the best way to disperse damage to fields. I'm also in favor of mobile fencing because mobile fencing can be seasonally moved. You can move the dog park location around. And then finally, I think that it's incumbent on us to protect both Hillview and our community members that are not comforted by the existence of the Hillview off-leash pilot. I personally, unless somebody convinces me here, I'm in favor of suspending the pilot, but absolutely recommending to council that our work continue through a subcommittee, a proactive subcommittee, to identify dog park solutions that serve our community. I think the time has passed where neighbors can just say, I don't like noise, so I'm not going to vote in favor of a dog park. I think there's a lot of support for dog parks in this city. If we keep the scale down, if we keep them in locations that are not right next to people's backyards, and there are several in the city that we could pursue, we can make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Valadez. Commissioner Wang.
Hello. I just, first of all, I want to just echo my thanks to Vice Chair Morris and Commissioner Corrigan for just all the work and the diligence and the personal commitment to this program. I mean, this started before, I joined the commission, and sort of every meeting you guys have talked about it, and sort of we're waiting for this day where, we could, talk about sort of your findings. So, I sort of agree with what a lot that has been said, that the objective of a pilot program is to test and learn. And then you sort of take an action based on those learnings. And I believe that the pilot program did exactly that, right? Provided learnings and data and insight that we didn't have before, that council didn't have before. Okay, it wasn't super scientific, but I think it served the purpose of just providing insight and giving learnings. Just from what I've read and the public comments and just from this discussion, it's that, it's really obvious that this is a divisive issue with strong feelings on multiple facets. But I think in a community as large and diverse as Los Altos, you're not going to get a consensus because people are just going to have different views, whether you're a dog owner, whether you're not a dog owner, just, whatever your personal views are. I don't have a dog. I've never had a dog. I have near zero knowledge or experience about what dogs need or what dog owners need to lead or control their dogs. So I'm coming at this from a mindset of just, kind of servicing residents of the city, which is what, kind of these bodies are meant to do. And my thought on this is that, so many of our residents do have dogs that, I think we should provide something to those dog owner residents, right? A facility, a program. I'm, really in favor of providing a place for our dog owner residents to take their dogs. I sort of see it as, being similarly in favor of the parents among Los Altos, residents who have young children to have a place to take their young children or programs for their young children. But I agree that, maybe Hillview is probably not the right venue or provides the right condition for a long-term dog park, off-leash dog park, solution. So, I really support kind of this notion of, working with staff and council to identify a viable long-term solution. I think, what was done at Hillview served the purpose of kind of testing and learning, as a play test. And now we sort of take that and move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Wang. So here are my thoughts. First, Los Altos owes dog owners some amenity that will allow them to exercise their dogs as they see fit. And I do see the value in the smaller dog parks that Commissioner Valadez mentioned, but I myself have a 75-pound black lab sired by an American field champion and a Canadian field champion. And if I don't throw a Frisbee 150 yards for that dog 20 times a day, he gets a little stir crazy. Now he's almost 10, so he's mostly over it. But certainly when he was a puppy, I had to go find a place where I could do that. Unfortunately, we have a lot of neighborhood parks. We don't actually have a lot of them, but all of them that we have are neighborhood parks. And what that means is that they're small and we lack park property just in relative terms compared to our neighbors. And the city of Mountain View is an interesting comparison. And if you look at Cuesta Park, where they have a dog park, it's a huge property. And so they're able to identify a piece of that property where they can have a dog park and it's not a multi-use situation to the extent that Hillview is. So unfortunately, we're left with two competing factors. One being that I think we owe our dog owning residents something. We've been trying to do something for them for a long time. And then the other one is that we just don't have an embarrassment of riches in terms of properties to look at. That said, I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have been at this for a long time, and there are problems that arose during this pilot program, but it was a pilot program. And now the park is going to be, Hillview is going to be closed for the winter for maintenance. And I, for one, support continuing the program with appropriate modifications. I don't know what they are right now, but I would support continuing the off-leash program at Hillview with perhaps a fence or, you know, other mitigating efforts put forth to address the residents' concerns who have expressed them. I don't think we should move backwards. And in fact, I think that we should try to find other places to augment this amenity for dog owners. And I hope that we will learn that by having more than one facility where owners can have their dogs off leash, that the use will be somewhat distributed, and the impacts and the harms would also be diluted by taking that approach. So I definitely favor continuation of this program. And you know, we are obligated to our residents, whether a majority approves or supports a particular program or not. I would say that it's a low percentage of Los Altos residents who play tennis, yet we have multiple tennis courts for them. It's not a huge percentage of Los Altos residents who play bocce ball, but we have bocce ball courts that we are building at the community center. You know, each constituency deserves to have their needs met as much as possible. And this is something that I think we can do. So again, I support continuing this program. Everybody's been heard from, so there may be some more remarks. We could also begin to entertain motions. Commissioner Ye, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, so I want to follow up on your point. I think only Teresa, you and I were around when we did the dog park workshops. That was a lot of work, and it went back and forth. Stuart,
I was too.
That's what I meant. You and Teresa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Stuart, one of the previous commissioners, spent a lot of time on this. Okay, and what we ended up with was a pilot program at Hillview. That was it. Okay, after all that work, that's all we were able to do because we listened to everybody in town, and there's no way everybody in town is going to agree on anything, whether it's, I don't know, dedicating a statue or anything. Okay, what I think a lot of the callers fail to realize, or a lot of the people who are opposed to anything for dogs, is that I don't have a dog, but I know for a lot of people, the dog is part of their family. Okay, like legitimately part of their family, especially when they don't have children. Now, imagine that. I would probably guess the amount of dog owners and the amount of people who have children in Los Altos is kind of the same. It's going to be close. Imagine if Los Altos did not provide any playgrounds for children. Okay, other cities would laugh at us because that is completely unreasonable. Now, the same could be said for the people who have dogs. They have nowhere in the city that they live in to go, and I find that to be unreasonable. So whether it wasn't perfect at Hillview, of course it's not. It won't be perfect anywhere, all right? It won't even be perfect at a place that was made just for dogs because there will be something that happens. But what we have to realize is that we have to provide something. And Hillview is actually pretty good. Maybe the field got kind of destroyed, but we're gonna learn from it, all right? Maybe people left their dog, excrement around, well, we're going to learn from it. All right. Maybe there weren't enough bags. We've already learned from that. So this was a pilot program. To try to eliminate a pilot program because it's not perfect that's just basically saying any pilot program will never work. All right. So I'm behind with Chair Daly to keep this going, especially after this. It's going to get repaired, the whole field over the winter, and then we'll see again what happens in the spring. We didn't have the spring this time.
Vice Chair Morris and then Commissioner Valadez.
So I wanted to make a couple other points, and we're a little disjointed because Director Legge isn't here, and I know there were things that were going to be brought up that haven't been brought up. The challenge for me in all of this is that, and I really would like the recommendation, for us to continue. I will be honest, one of the most challenging parts of all of this is that it doesn't matter where we put this pilot program, it doesn't change the behavior in the other parks. So that's one thing that I want people to understand. And even when I ask people point blank at Hillview, if the off-leash wasn't continued here, but it was continued at, at another park, would you go? No, I would stay. They stopped and thought, but quite honestly said, no, quite honestly, I'd still come here. So in Los Altos, one of the biggest challenges is to get people to abide by any of the rules that have to do with, it's at this park, not at that park. So, so this idea of we can do something at 1, 2, or 3 parks and that's going to work is incorrect. The other is the space does need to be fairly large for exactly the reason Chair Daly mentioned, is we have dogs that need to be able to run. It doesn't have to be as large as Hillview because that field is huge and you just don't need that much space. And also if we reduce the size a little bit, that would naturally reduce the amount of people there at one time, which would also help with the noise. But they really need a location for the dogs to be able to run a bit of a distance, turn around and come back. So that takes care of the exercise part of it. There has been discussion about doing the collaboration with Mountain View, and I believe that that was being looked into, so that we might participate in a way that, financially we help with that. And that might be a good option for people during the winter months while our fields are closed down. And I wanted to say, so I'm in favor of what we're recommending. I also want to say, I don't actually feel we owe dog owners the right to have their dogs off leash in any of our parks. I don't think we owe it to them any more than we might owe it to, let's say, a Wiccan group that wanted to do witchcraft in the parks, and there were 100 of them or 300 of them in the city, just to use an example. I don't know why I'm using that, maybe because it's by Halloween or something. But the point is, we have so many subsets of groups in our city that we're not going to be able to accommodate all of it. However, this has been going on for 10 years. I've been working on it for a couple years now. The issue is not going away. So I would like to have it have some teeth to it, some parameters to it. I would like for people to be able to relax and have their dogs off leash for at least some period of the day. If they choose to not abide by those times, then I think we need to be dealing with that in a more robust way with the fining and so on. There are rules need to be need to be followed. And people have a right to peace and quiet in their neighborhood. And if we have the hours, then there would be times that there would be peace and quiet, and it would allow the neighbors to be able to call and say, I'm sorry, we have people off leash, can you come deal with it? It doesn't work for neighbors to go out and ask people to stop doing what they're doing because people are confrontational and angry, and it's not safe. So a neighbor just told me about doing just that the other morning at a park where there was someone out whistling for his 3 dogs, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and she opened her door and said, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. Can you be quiet? You're waking us up. And he got really mad and huffy, and I thought, well, it was brave of her to do it. I wouldn't have done it. So it's an issue. We need to come up with the solutions for it. Again, I don't think Hillview is the place. It's not going to work to have that be a shared field. It is not going to work. And there is no way that field is going to hold up and be safe for Little League. We really need to be looking at where else can we do it. People predicted that the field would be a disaster with the mixed use idea, and it is a mess. And that, again, that's not to say I'm not in support of having off leash somewhere. And so I think the collaboration with Mountain View is one option that would be not to shove it down the road or stick it somewhere else, but to be able to say we have that plus whatever else we come up with. But do know very clearly that people are letting their dogs off leash in every single park. It's been going on for years, and it'll never stop, no matter how many perimeter fenced in spaces we have. And then the other thing is small fenced in dog parks were beaten to the ground in our workshops. And we as a commission that were around when that happened know that most people did not want a fenced in dog park. It was just shot down during the workshops. However, we have it on our to-do as a commission. I think it's in 2025. So if we wanted to discuss the small fenced in spaces again, I think we'd have to, as a commission, decide that we want to move that forward and bring it up for a discussion sooner than that. But we need it needs to be a fieldish type thing, even if it's a narrow fieldish type thing, like that just allows that running back and forth and doesn't have a huge round space to it or something. I think would work fine for having some off-leash activity. So anyway, those are the main things, and the collaboration I know was going to be brought up tonight, so I'm bringing it up because Director Leahy isn't here. Okay, that's it for me.
I think Commissioner Valadez, did you have some remarks? And then Commissioner Corrigan, we'll get back to you after Commissioner Valadez.
Yes, I have to reiterate, I really don't think that Hillview baseball field is amenable to multi-use between a sport like baseball, where field condition is really important, and dog use. Believe that all the work that was done in early workshops was at a different time in Los Altos's history. I'm not saying that it's not useful. All I'm saying is that the conditions now in the city are different. There are way more dog owners than there used to be. And I believe that it's a matter of us making recommendations that hopefully the council will adopt, that will give residents, show them that they kind of have a choice. In other words, we need to have dog parks. We need to have them. The question is, do you want them to be open where people will be at risk of, having dogs run out of the park and possibly affect fearful people or kids? All it takes is one dog to jump up on a 4-year-old, and that 4-year-old's going to hate dogs for the rest of their lives. And so we don't make rules to accommodate the common occurrences. We make rules about safety to accommodate the rare negative occurrences. And fences are necessary for dog parks. You can ask any professional trainer, any behaviorist. You can ask anybody that lives their lives or their profession around dogs. And dog parks need dog fences. And they often need vestibule type gates so that you can train your dog to be calm when they go into a dog park, so you don't get those crazy barking and tussle situations. I believe, the technology exists to make mobile, small, or even reasonably sized dog parks that, will actually engage community. Because if, let's say, people want local dog parks, they may not have to walk to them, but they sure would like to, or maybe just a quick drive over to the dog park. So going to Mountain View, while I would do it, I now go to Mountain View, I go to Palo Alto because I want to go to a fenced-in dog park. But not everybody will do that. So if we want to believe that neighborhood dog parks are important, and I believe they are, even though they're not a requirement for me, but I know that they are, then we should really be pushing for the idea of simultaneously establishing multiple dog parks in our city. And we can use temporary fencing to move them around. There are, I mean, I can name 4 locations right now in our park cities, in our city parks, where the park would be well away from residents. It would endure noise. Because we have more parks, there would be less density. We would therefore have lower noise. They would possibly and likely be visually sheltered from view. And you know, we could do something very quickly and give these people, in other words, have a phase 2 pilot where we do 4 parks at different spots: North Los Altos, Middle Los Altos, South Los Altos. I can name the locations right now. And if we told the dog community that we were going to do this, you wouldn't have 300 petitioners in favor. You would have 2,000 petitioners in favor. And I think it would be very, it would create this community people are looking for, where maybe this month the spot is that location, and next month they're going to go to another location, but it's still close by. And now people are crisscrossing their neighborhoods, and we would have engagement on a level that we just haven't seen. I mean, but I think that continuing an ungated, unfenced dog program in a multi-use situation for a surface-sensitive sport like baseball, we're just going to keep having major complaints, and so close to the community center, so close to the parking lot, so close to paths, so close to the library and museum. It's just rife with issues. And I can't be convinced that that's a good location unless we also create some very distinct fencing in another part of the community center, not the actual baseball field. Now, if we want to create another baseball field somewhere else and not lose that capacity, maybe I could be convinced. I just think safety is paramount, and equitable access to our use parks is very important. So I still would not favor continuing the program at Hillview, but I really want dog parks.
Thank you, Commissioner Valadez. I'm going to go to Commissioner Corrigan and then Commissioner Ye, and then back to Vice Chair Morris, unless Commissioner Wang wants to get in before Commissioner Morris has her third go. Okay, Commissioner Corrigan.
Yeah, mine's just a fine point to add to Vice Chair Morris and Commissioner Valadez. The 2 points that jump out to me are, you know, the fencing and setbacks from residences. I think my concern with Hillview is just right there smack in the neighborhood. I really think we have to be cognizant of the neighbors and trying to find setbacks that are meaningful. So that's a fine point for me that I want to raise.
Thank you. Commissioner Ye?
Yeah, so I just want to give my opinion on this mixed use concept that I keep hearing. The argument that the field is not in good condition for baseball, I think, is disingenuous, because Commissioner Corrigan said that the infield isn't touched. Okay, so anyone who's ever played baseball, that's the only thing that's important. Everything else could be whatever, because it's just outfielders running around. They'll know where the holes are because they're playing out there. As long as the infield's fine, I'm okay with the outfield being like whatever they're saying that the dogs are doing. It'll make the players better too. So I don't understand this. What's wrong with sharing the field of an outfield that only 3 players stand on at any point, and they'll know where the danger areas are anyways? I don't get it. And it's Little League. It's not like they're like blasting the ball at 500 feet.
I would love to answer that at some point.
Okay, you'll have an opportunity. Vice Chair Morris.
I was wondering if we have agreement on fencing. It sounds like we do, and I was just curious if people agree that we need some perimeter fencing or some sort of fencing. Is that okay to ask? Like, can you raise your hand and say if you think fencing's important?
Yeah, we can take a straw poll. I mean,
Okay.
who thinks fencing is important?
Okay, so
All
5
right.
of us do.
So,
Okay, and then the other part about the shared, I just, you know, when I heard the part about the mowing and the feces being spread, I was like, that's it. If I had kids, that's it. And then the other part of it, we actually charge money to use our fields, for Little League to use the fields. They pay a fee for them to use that field. So I think we would have to figure out if any field could be shared in a way that they thought that that was okay. And I think the only way we would know is if they try it. So you know, the idea of like we could move forward with any field that's used for sports without some sort of trial period, I don't think would work. I think we'd have to make sure that it was acceptable to whomever was paying to use a field. And then one of the callers, it was, I think, Jean said that the Seahawks, I think, were refusing to use that field now.
Skyhawks.
Because, because of the dog activity on the field. So they've been moved to, I think, the soccer field area. So there is some concern that this does generate income for our city and for our parks system. So so that's a concern I have for the Hillview location or any other field. Also, Commissioner Valadez has mentioned the temporary fencing. I think we would have to check with staff. We did in the attachment A, I believe we have the pop-up idea and the rotate thing, and there is some challenge staff-wise for that. So if we were to proceed with trying to find solutions, that's something that we'd have to work with staff with to make sure that if it were something that rotated, that we'd be able to do that with staff's agreement. So that's all. I just, because we have had a conversation about it. And then the idea of spreading the wealth or the burden, however you want to look at it, across the city is something that we 100% agree with as a subcommittee.
So I've been on the board for Pony Baseball for many years, on the board for Mountain View Los Altos girls softball for many years, and in each of those cases, I was heavily involved in field maintenance. I have done a lot of work on all of the fields around here, and I can tell you also, as a dog owner, that they crap whether they're on the leash or off the leash, right? And so you really don't have more fecal matter in aggregate simply because you have an off-leash program. Now, granted, an owner can get away with it if the dog's off leash and not in their immediate control. They don't necessarily suffer the same public shame that they do when they have their dog on leash and he drops a deuce right in front of somebody who's walking down the sidewalk or what have you. But I think that the fecal matter issue is not dispositive for me anyway. And that's based on, for example, using the fields at Oak School and knowing that people take their, I mean, that's probably, other than Rosita, which by the way is also a baseball and soccer field, those are probably the two fields in our community that get the most dog use prior to this pilot program. So I do think that having a fence, putting in a fence, we talked to Director Hernandez about this too. I mean, it's not going to solve all the problems. There's certainly going to be more problems that persist, but I think we're going to have to live with some less than perfect outcomes, and in order to advance this issue. So I would recommend to continue the program at Hillview, but to make the appropriate changes. And I wouldn't even necessarily specify in a motion what those changes might be, other than I might consider saying, okay, well, we'll put in a fence. But in general, I would say that the council is going to probably direct staff to make a report on what needs to be improved before they go forward. So I think at this point, let's get down to seeing where we are on a vote. Does anybody have a motion on the recommendation from the subcommittee? And we can discuss the motion too. The discussion doesn't need to stop with a motion, but I want to see where we are if we have momentum to get a vote passed.
I see a hand from Vice Chair Morris.
I move to accept the subcommittee's recommendations as they are.
Okay, do we have a second?
I saw two at the same time.
All right.
I'm going to go with Commissioner Valadez, who put her hands up
Commissioner
2 times.
Valadez's second of this motion, and we are going to have discussion of this motion. But before we go forward with discussion of this motion, I am going to offer a competing or substitute motion, which we will dispense with first, and it may make the main motion moot. And my competing motion would be that we recommend to council to continue the off-leash program with appropriate changes when the parks reopen from their maintenance period. Is there a second for my competing motion? Commissioner Ye. All right. We can have discussion, but we will vote on the competing motion first. Does anybody have any remarks they would like to make about either of these two motions? Commissioner Valadez.
I would not support the competing motion because appropriate changes is just too vague. I would want a more substantive motion. But again, I am fundamentally not in favor of Hillview as a site for the reasons I've already stated. I'm sorry?
Because of the multi-use issue?
Correct. And,
really
I won't address Commissioner Ye's comments about outfield usage, but I too was a board member of Los Altos Little League for many years. I was a player agent, and I was also, responsible for some field work, and I was also field coordinator for MVLA soccer for many years on the board there, and very familiar with what happens. There's a difference between casual unlawful usage of a sports field and dedicated dog usage of a sports field, and field condition is extremely important to sports. Doesn't matter if it's one person or 50 people. Moreover, outfields are generally used as the practice areas for multiple teams as they train. So field condition is important.
Yeah, Commissioner, Vice Chair Morris, do you still have your hand up, or is that a legacy? Okay, go ahead, and then we'll come to you, Commissioner Ye. Go ahead, Commissioner Vice Chair Morris.
Okay, so my comments about this. I think one of the reasons why I can't support your motion, Pete, is because I know that we have some alternatives that are feasible and are feasible in a fairly short amount of time. So I would like the subcommittee, who's been working on this for 6 months, to have the opportunity to look into some of these alternatives. I also feel very strongly that we shifted from that being an ideal location where nobody had a problem with it to it being a less than ideal location. We have people on that park, and it's actually closer than any of the other parks that we looked at that we didn't do the pilot at. So now that there has been complaints and concerns, even with the perimeter fencing, I would not support it. And I think if perimeter fencing, if we were to do anything at Hillview baseball field, I would recommend not having it be a baseball field anymore, moving a dog area closer to the community center and having sound walls. So I just can't support it. And I understand about the feces. I think being on the dog park, I have to tell you this, I never really thought about these things before. I mean, I've taken kids to the park for years, and all of a sudden, especially when Commissioner Ekman was with us, I thought, oi, you know, as soon as he brought up some of those things, I thought, this is disgusting, right? And so then when I heard it again about the mowing, I thought, this is disgusting. The difference is what you said, though. People who have their dogs on leash typically are more aware of when their dog is pooping. And yes, there's some shame to them not picking it up. But there are incidences, and I think we have to address these as we move forward. There are incidences of people being at Hillview past dark because the hours allow them to be there past dark. And they've said, but we can't see our dog squatting. And it's like, well, no, because it's dark. So, you know, and even with headlamps, I was told, we can't see them squatting. We can't see where they're pooping. And it's like, yes, because it's dark. And really, that's one of the problems with our parks and our timing is it just doesn't work very well for the actual daylight and dark situation. So hours are something that have to be massaged further. So anyway, I'm sorry I can't support it, but I do think we can come up with some things, and if the commission wanted to put some timelines on it, I think that would be fine too. But I would ask that you also might trust that we are as invested in making this finding a conclusion, because it's time consuming for us too, you know, and also because why not? Why should we drag this out? Let's get something done.
Good points. Commissioner Wayne.
I just had a question about the first motion. So if does that mean that while we're working with staff and coming up with alternatives, does that mean that for the dog owners, like they wouldn't have a place to go? It just sort of go back to no off-leash place for them to go until something else is put in place?
May I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the answer is yes. However, our fields are closed from the middle of November until almost the end of January.
All fields?
All of them.
Yeah.
So we're not supposed to have dogs off leash no matter what program we would have during that time period.
But
so that's the
realistically,
thing.
it also
There's a little
means
window of opportunity here.
Realistically, it also means that when we come out of the maintenance period, there will be no solution. Because of the history of this issue, it is highly unlikely that we will come up with an alternative, agree to it, get sufficient public feedback to make a decision, to recommend it to council, have council vote on it, implement it, and move forward. If we shut this program down, there is no guarantee that there will be any solution for dog owners anytime in the future. And that's why I think that even though it's less than perfect, and in fact flawed in some important ways, that we should instead use our hiatus for maintenance to make some adaptations and make the best of it. Commissioner Ye.
Yeah, so for the newer commissioners, the process isn't just throw it to council and then let them do whatever they want. We're going to have to go through the same process we went through before. Is that right? Okay, that took 2 years just to get to this point, okay? And no, actually, no, maybe 10 years, okay? I would wager if we don't allow Hillview to continue, Los Altos will not get a dog park or off-leash, period. Because that was probably the most ideal situation that we could have had in our city. It was already a fence. It wasn't really used. And where else are you going to put it? You want to put it in Lincoln Park? that entire neighborhood's going to mobilize. You want to go put it at Rosita, that entire neighborhood's going to mobilize. Nowhere's going to allow this. It's going to be way louder because no one really lives around Hillview and it already has a fence. You're not changing the grass. It's already like that and it'll stay like that. So for the newer commissioners, I want you to understand this took a really long time just to get to this point. And all the things you can picture, Commissioner Valadez, all the places you can think of Los Altos, we already went through this process and people in the town did not want it. And the commission, the city council, who is still there, the majority of them are still there, they didn't go with our recommendation when we recommended a fenced-in area, okay? So I'm gonna tell you, my true belief is if we shoot this down and kill Hillview, we won't get one. I don't have a dog, doesn't bother me, but I'm a resident of this city and I was born and raised here and I would like for the other people I live with to have a place for their dogs. That's where I'm at. And if we're gonna kill it, then fine. That's what you guys wanna do. That's okay. We're voting.
All right. So let's have a couple of more remarks, but then let's go ahead and put these motions to a test and see where we stand after that, okay? Vice Chair Morris, do you have something else you want to add before we call the question?
Yes, I think one thing to understand is there's a space at the Hillview Community Center in the back area that is not being utilized, and that has been suggested by dog owners that are using the Hillview field as a location that might be able to be used. So we already have that as a possibility. That with, I don't know that we could do temporary fencing. We'd have to ask Director Hernandez about that, but that with some fencing to it would probably work. We have some redwoods that need to be protected. I will add, Commissioner Yates, there are a ton of houses along Hillview that you just don't see. There are probably, I think it's 2 or 3 right along the fence that you basically just don't see because there's a lot of greenery, maybe, yeah, at least 3. And Commissioner Corrigan can address this because he walked that area. Then there's a separation and there's another set of houses across from those houses. So it's like a little—
I would argue that there are houses next to every park in our city.
Yes, and there are. But I just want to tell you, you said there are none, and I'm telling you there are a ton there. No, there are way more than you know.
We're not living in Arizona, okay? There's going to be houses by every park.
You need to walk that neighborhood, though, to understand it. So anyway, I think that I respectfully disagree with you, Commissioner Ye, about this will die. It will not die. I've been working on this for a long time, and I'm very tenacious about getting something done with this because I know that this is a situation that continues no matter what. So I'd like to find a solution to it. And in order to do it right, I think we need to take what we've learned from the pilot and come up with some other options that include what we've learned in the pilot. To just shove ahead with that location based on the fact, well, we had the pilot there, people like it. It's, that's just, for me, feels a little irresponsible. So I would like to say, let's stay calm. Let's find out a better solution to this than what we have. And yes, let's get it going. And I don't think that we have to take a long time to do this. We don't have to go back. We don't have to do anything as far as I understand, but notice it that we're going to have a meeting about this. We've had the pilot program, we're learning from it, and these are the recommendations that we'll be making from the pilot program.
But Teresa, you've made arguments to other people, all of us have. We've had negotiations with people. What I would do, if we kill Hillview, the first thing I would do to present to City Council is, hey, you couldn't even make it work there. Why would you think it would work in my neighborhood? And you know what? They'd be right.
All right, let's go ahead and call the question. I appreciate everybody's points of view, but we're going to take a vote on the competing motion. And I suspect I know what the outcome is, but that motion, as I recall, Casey, was to continue the program at Hillview with the appropriate changes. So.
And it was seconded by Commissioner Ye.
Yeah, we're going to take a vote on that right now.
Okay.
All those
Chair
in favor of the competing motion? Let's do it by roll call. Casey, go ahead.
Okay. Chair Daly.
Aye.
Vice Chair Morris.
No.
Okay. Commissioner Ye.
Yes.
Commissioner Corrigan.
No.
Commissioner Valadez.
No.
And Commissioner Wang.
Yes.
Okay, so we're split. That motion fails to carry because it doesn't get the 4 votes needed. And now we'll go back to the main motion. And Vice Chair Morris, yes, could we get a restatement of that so we know specifically what we're voting on? So we are voting to, let me ask this, is the motion to terminate the pilot program and go back and go back to the drawing board to find other solutions? Is that a fair statement of the motion? What is it? Would you please, Vice Chair Morris, would you please give it to us in your words?
So it's moved to accept the subcommittee's recommendations as they are. Those recommendations are, yes, to end the off-leash program at Hillview as it is. And
Casey,
then
would you bring it up on screen share so we can see what that slide says?
Yes, I can do that. Give me just.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Vice Chair Morris. I just thought
it's
it would
okay.
be
Actually,
better
you
to
can
have it on screen.
You can continue. It'll take me just a moment to find it, actually.
Yeah. Go ahead, Vice Chair Morris.
it's fine. I mean, once you see it, you'll understand, but the intent, and if it, you know, needs to be different than that, is to, or needs to have something added to it, is for us to work on some of the alternatives that we have in the attachment A. And some of the things I've heard tonight, and I don't know if Commissioner Corrigan would agree, but to incorporate some of the ideas that we've heard tonight. And I think we might be closer together than we are further apart. And so I think it's a matter of just us listening to what everybody said and then trying as quickly as possible to come up with a feasible alternative. Maybe it'll be a series of alternatives, and maybe it'll be implementing one alternative immediately as we possibly can, and then implementing others, you know, at a slightly longer period of time. So I think, and I think we could probably come back. I don't know, because I don't know how staff time is, but I think we could probably come back, you know, I don't know if November, but December with some ideas, and, you know, like maybe the top 3 or 4, and then make recommendations, and you guys can scrub them.
No,
and see what you
we
think.
cannot. We cannot. We
Why?
can come back and have a discussion of them.
Right.
We cannot advance a recommendation like that without having public outreach.
Well, may I ask you to clarify why? I just don't understand. We've done the workshops and we've done the pilot program, and we know how the pilot program went. So now why can't we make recommendations based on all of that work that we've done?
Because that's like effectively a runaround of public comment.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that the residents get heard, Teresa. I hope that sentiment.
So I just want to make sure this is the slide that you
I hear them. Yes, I hear them loud and clearly, Chair Daly. I've been interacting with a lot of them this entire pilot program, and I am always pro-resident in all of my decisions, but we have 2 sides of this. We have the residents.
Yes, but we will not. I can tell you as the chair that in my term as chair, we will not be voting up recommendations for new locations without going through the same process that we went through for Heritage Oaks, Hillview, Lincoln Park, and Mackenzie. And we will, moreover, be obligated to do an even better job of interfacing with the community than we did in those instances, because we were told unequivocally by a lot of residents that they simply didn't know about the workshops. And we all agreed at the time that one of the things we learned was, you know, our public noticing efforts need to improve. So we can take up recommendations that pertain to Hillview, because that is something that's
Well, then
been
let us
through a
work on Hillview.
public process. That is something that's been through a full public process. And so we can take up recommendations that pertain to Hillview and that stem from the pilot program at Hillview and what we learned about operating a program at Hillview, but we will not be advancing recommendations for any other locations without going through a robust public process, not while I'm chairman. Next term, when you're chairman, you can make that choice.
Well, I won't be chairman because I'm a woman, but
Chair. Well,
I will,
well noted. Chair.
I want to make a point here about Hillview. So the fact is we have opposition to it. So you're saying we have opposition, and so they're at other parks, so therefore we can't move forward with any recommendations, yet we're willing to move forward with the recommendation to continue at Hillview, given the fact that we've heard plenty of opposition.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, but it sounds that way, so I'm not trying to be
but that's not what I'm
disrespectful.
saying.
Okay.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. We have been through a public process with Hillview. There are some objections. We are about to vote on a motion to discontinue the program at Hillview. I think that that is suitable fidelity to those sentiments. We will not be taking up a discussion of any other locations without doing the same kind of public outreach that we did for Hillview, Heritage Oaks, Lincoln Park, and Mackenzie. And that doesn't happen between now and December. So that's where we are.
Okay, but Hillview we can certainly come back with Hillview recommendations.
We can decide to recommend to discontinue Hillview, or we can recommend to continue Hillview and offer, you know, changes that need to be made. Although we just voted on that recommendation and it didn't get the 4 votes that were needed. Let's take up this main motion and see where we are on that. And if that doesn't pass, then, you know, maybe there's a friendly amendment or something that would get it another vote. But let's see where we are right now.
Are you calling the question? Because we haven't had this.
Yes. Casey, please read the motion based on the slide.
So the motion based on the slide.
Actually, I'm not going to call the question just yet. We're going to discuss it, but let's hear the statement of the motion, and then everybody will have an opportunity to have one more round of discussion on this particular motion.
So the motion based on the slide, or my understanding of it, is that Vice Chair Morris would accept the subcommittee's requests that the following recommendations be sent to City Council for approval: to discontinue the off-leash program at the Hillview baseball field, and that the subcommittee actively work with staff to further explore options for off-leash activity in Los Altos. And my understanding is that Commissioner Valadez seconded that motion.
Yep. Okay. I have a friendly amendment. I think that the second bullet point is too confining, because if you're going to, as I said, if you're going to begin to evaluate other locations, we need a more robust process than just what the subcommittee can do. So I would just simply suggest a friendly change that says the commission will explore further options for off-leash activity in Los Altos?
I just want to clarify. So the first bullet point would remain the same, and the
Yeah,
second
first
bullet
point would remain the same. There's no reason for, I mean, that's the motion. Discontinue off-leash program at Hillview Baseball Field, and either subcommittee actively works with staff to further explore options for off-leash activity in Los Altos, or if my friendly amendment is accepted, the second bullet point would simply say the commission works to explore other options for off-leash activity in Los Altos. Vice Chair Morris, how do you feel about the friendly amendment?
I feel like I need to hear from Commissioner Corrigan.
Commissioner Corrigan?
I believe that works. I am not sure of the nuance of it, just saying that I guess I'm trying to figure out who in the commission is going to work on this. Is it, or what's the difference conceptually? Because I thought the subcommittee was chartered with doing that work. So what is, can you maybe explain what the commission would do?
Well, in the past, the commission has staffed 2 workshops with the community. The commission has created a survey. The commission has, I mean, the activity level in general, the activity level for the whole commission is of a sort of a higher profile and more engaging dynamic than when a subcommittee works in a more insulated fashion and then comes forward with findings. It's a more open process, a process more open to the public. And I love subcommittee work. I'm like Mr. Subcommittee should do everything, but I think in this case, this is the issue of. I mean, this is the biggest issue that this commission has taken up. Director Hernandez.
The only comment I wanted to make on that is making sure that the commission understands that if the commission works on these things, and I think that's the point Chair Daly's trying to make, if the commission works on this, it absolutely is a more public process because any of your meetings have to be noticed. Subcommittees can work a little bit more independently without notifications and more often. So
that's right. Subcommittees are designed to be less than a quorum of the full committee so that they can have deliberations that aren't subject to the Brown Act. But the Brown Act would govern that our deliberations are open to the public if it's taken up at a commission level.
But deliberations can't happen in a subcommittee. I mean, that's kind of a moot point. The subcommittee simply makes recommendations and does the legwork. So it has to come back to the commission, but it's the subcommittee that actively works to further explore options, not the commission.
That's not really true. There's ongoing work for the subcommittee for sure. A lot of legwork. There's no doubt that Commissioner Ekman and Commissioner Weinberg and perhaps it was
Spielman, me.
No, prior to your involvement with this commission, Commissioner Lindermeyer, I think it was, when we were identifying locations, when we were fielding surveys, their subcommittee did a lot of work. There's no denying that there would be ongoing work for the subcommittee to do, but we're talking about, first of all, when we vote on a motion, right, it goes into the minutes. We do action minutes, right? And so our action minutes are the public record of what we have chosen to do. And by stating in the motion that this is a commission effort, we are putting in the record that we've taken the action to make it a commission effort. If we put it in the record that the subcommittee will continue to work behind the scenes, then the public will have no idea what the subcommittee is doing, other than our subcommittee reports on a monthly basis. which I don't believe is sufficient for this issue. Vice Chair Morris.
I'm trying to understand. So I want to say I hear you. I understand exactly what you're saying about the public outreach part. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And I still feel that we've done so much public outreach and we have so much data and we have results of our workshops, and we now have results of our pilot program, which was part of the process we were supposed to go through. And then my understanding is that based on that pilot program, a decision was to be made about where to go next. So I don't think anywhere in the whole process it said, and only decide about Hillview, what was going to happen next at Hillview. I think the whole point of the pilot program was to see what we could do in our city and in our parks. So I'm again, I fully understand what you're saying, Chair Daley. I'm just trying to say I'm not sure that we can't move forward on some of that. However,
all right, just a moment. Director Hernandez?
Yeah, I would just, and maybe I can provide some assistance with this right now, is going through this process several times as the Director of Recreation and the liaison to the Parks and Rec Commission. Just a lot of that public process came to conclusion. So when this went to a public process for certain areas such as Grant Park or the other one was at Shoup area. So when those meetings were done, I think the residents in the questioned area of where you're doing off-leash programs or dog activity, I believe, and I know in speaking to them afterward, that they felt there was a conclusion that now it is just at Hillview. So I would recommend that this commission, if they are choosing other sites, I think it would be the expectation that the public process be followed through again.
Yeah. So Teresa, can I just present kind of a hypothetical, okay? Imagine at our meeting today, instead of whatever we're talking about, we say, we all have a consensus 6-0 vote that Hillview went awesome. So let's go put a off-leash at Grant Park, and we send that to council. That could have happened based on what you're talking about, correct?
I've got it. I understand. So I have a friendly amendment to the friendly amendment. And again, I would like to hear what Commissioner Corrigan says about it. But so discontinue, keep the first bullet point, discontinue off-leash program at Hillview Baseball Field. Commission work on alternatives starting with the discussion of details in attachment A of this report. So, yeah, and of course, always with the details of what we've just all discussed and the great ideas that everybody brought and public input, pro and negative. But anyway, so I'd like to see what Commissioner Corrigan says. So just to make it clear, discontinue off-leash program at Hillview Baseball Field, and the commission will work on alternatives starting with a discussion of attachment A of the report. And I would be fine with that being the motion if that being the friendly amendment to your friendly amendment.
You can amend your own motion like you just suggested. Okay. And actually all you need is Commissioner Valadez, who seconded it, to say she's good with that.
That's correct.
So
Okay.
Commissioner Valadez, and then Commissioner Corrigan can offer his thoughts when we're discussing the motion. But first we need to go to the individual who seconded it.
I second it again.
Okay, good. All right, so now we can have some discussion of it. So Commissioner Corrigan, do you have, I'll let you start off the discussion.
Yeah, I'll just say I support the motion, and I appreciate the explanation about more public comment being the goal of all this, that we have to engage public comment, which I wasn't clear on that I thought we were doing that with the subcommittee. I didn't realize that this is a different process. So I support it.
Okay. Commissioner Valadez, do you have some commentary?
I have a question for Director Hernandez, if he can pop in. What is the official date at this time for the fields to be reopened? I heard January thrown about.
There's currently no official date. We usually go off of the weather. It usually goes through January, so it'll probably be sometime in February. Whether it's the 1st of February or towards the end of February will depend on the weather.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because in my history with the fields, I mean, a lot of times we were waiting for them to open in early March because they weren't quite ready for use because of weather, because of maybe there was some reseeding that was done, et cetera, et cetera. So knowing that, I mean,
Can I slightly amend what I said now that you're mentioning that, though? That is usually the plan. The field and the wear and tear on the field, because usually there's not a lot of wear and tear in the fall. So repairs on that are usually limited. We're not sure the extent of the repairs that we'll have to do at this point. So we still anticipate that we still could get in February, though.
that's all right. Basically, what the point I was trying to make was that this isn't kind of a, start and stop date for closure. It's something that moves, and it's more often that the field opens, quote, later than one expected rather than opening earlier than one expected. I just wanted to add that to the mix because I think it gives us time to continue to work. It doesn't stop all the outreach we have to do and all that. I'm just saying it's time. The only comment I would make in terms of the motion is that I think adding the attachment A, which is why I seconded, was critical, because I don't want all that work to be lost. I think it's a good starting point to start to assess alternatives.
It'll go to council no matter what, but it's fine to call it out. I support that in the motion. Vice Chair Morris, I'm going to go ahead and call the question now. Okay. Casey, would you please restate the motion and we'll take a roll call vote?
I just rewrote it.
Commissioner Wang.
Sorry, I was just looking at the attachment reference. And do you mean attachment 1 to your report? Because I didn't see an attachment A. And so attachment 1 was all of the.
Yes, attachment 1. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Attachment 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I will adjust that because I have attachment A. So the motion is to discontinue the off-leash program at Hillview Baseball Field, and for the commission to work on the alternative, or no, the, that's not a word. Whatever I wrote, it started with I and ended
you want
with
me to read
off-leash
it?
alternatives, for the commission to work on off-leash alternatives.
Off-leash, okay. Because
No,
I wrote.
it wasn't that.
Vice Chair Morris, you say what it should be, please.
It's the commission will work on alternatives, starting with discussion of attachment A, and the numeral 1 is next to it in our staff report.
Okay.
I mean, in the report.
Okay, because I have bullet points written down. So was there something specific that you listed about the bullet points?
No, it was the bullet points on the slide that comprise the motion, right? So I think we understand what the motion is. So let's take a vote.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Daly.
No.
Vice Chair, or I'm sorry, I said Commissioner, but I meant Chair. Vice Chair Morris.
Yes.
Commissioner Ye.
No.
Commissioner Corrigan.
Yes.
Commissioner Valadez.
Yes.
And Commissioner Wang.
Yes.
That passes.
Okay. So given the late hour and the fact that we took care of the primary order of business, I move to adjourn.
You don't have to move that.
I don't have to move. We're
Nope.
adjourning. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad that we were able to affirm a recommendation, even though it's not my personal choice. I'm very pleased with the way we worked together tonight to get that done on what has in the past been a very contentious issue. Good work. Thank you.
We're gonna do it. We're going
Thank
to
you.
do it.
For
Thanks, everybody.
for anyone who is still on listening, all comment on this meeting, all public comment, it will all be submitted to City Council. So I don't want anyone to have to be bombarded with questions about whether or not their voices will be heard, because they will.
Thank you. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And one
everybody.
more thing.
Thank you, commissioners.
Yes, one more thing.
One
Go
more
ahead.
thing. Thank you so much for Director Hernandez for stepping in and taking up the lead for Donna as she needed to be gone. And then also, oh my gosh, Casey, you've been amazing once again. Thank you for getting our slides up and for managing that so well. It's so appreciated.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. And Manny, it's like old times.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
All right.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Good work.